Chapter 1055. One of the two bolts of golden lightning flew towards the southern wilderness and wiped out half of the demon Venerable palace. Although the elusive demon Venerable didn't die, he was most likely severely injured. He didn't even show up in front of his trusted subordinates to instruct them on the next step of the plan. Secretly, some people were already ready to make a move. This group of people could be said to have ulterior motives. Some coveted the wealth and resources produced by the gold-squandering den and the gentle village. Some had enmity with the demon Venerable and wanted to kick him when he was down. There were even many people who had offended Lin Yuan and wanted to take this opportunity to please Lin Yuan. The other golden bolt of lightning was headed for the imperial capital of the Chuyan dynasty. Or rather, it was the Chuyan Empire's throne room. At that time, the Chuyan Emperor was carrying out the night court with the civil and military officials that he valued. After all, the Chuyan Empire was never a peaceful place. The people and demonic beasts living there were already used to living at night. Other than the mortals who needed to farm or the cultivators from other places, there was basically no one in the Chuyan Empire during the day. The night court had just started, and a series of procedures had just been completed. The Chuyan Emperor had just taken his seat, and the civil and military officials stood in order. Immediately after, there was an earth-shaking disaster. Even the demon Venerable, who had shocked the Chuyan and Xinjiang empires and killed countless Void Realm cultivators, couldn't withstand that bolt of divine lightning. To the Chuyan Empire's imperial court, where the strongest person was only at the Heaven Realm, that bolt of divine lightning was a terrifying existence. In short, after the divine lightning struck, half of the imperial city was turned into ruins. Apart from a few old officials who were sick, the rest of the officials were all killed. Even the emperor of Chuyan was killed by the divine lightning. The emperor who was hit by the divine lightning did not even have a complete corpse, let alone a complete corpse. Even his ashes were not collected. No one knew why the Black Jiao in the northern frontier was so angry. However, it was obvious that the Chuyan Empire must have plotted something with the demon Venerable of the southern wilderness to enrage the Black Jiao. As for those who suffered an undeserved disaster, he could only say that he deserved it. Frankly speaking, Black Jiao's actions had undoubtedly violated the various treaties set by the guardians of the heavenly gates. In the past, even if something like this happened that angered the king of a country, the two sides would not directly start a war. Instead, they would present facts and reason, and invite the guardians of the heavenly gates to mediate. Of course, the outcome of the arbitration would mainly depend on which side had more supporters. The outcome would naturally be biased towards which side. This kind of behavior was also a way for the guardians of the heavenly gates to make the seven great empires serve them more attentively. However, the other six empires were easy to deal with, but what about the northern frontier? The northern frontier was now like an airtight iron gate. Not to mention the guardians of the heavenly gates. Even the local practitioners in the northern frontier would be suppressed by the officials of the northern frontier if they wanted to establish any sect or gang. Those who were stubborn would be killed without mercy. The Black Jiao had never given the guardians of the heavenly gates any face. After all, regardless of whether the demon court or other forces stood behind the Black Jiao, overall, they were much more powerful than the guardians of the heavenly gates. The rules were indeed there, but regardless of whether they were good or bad, only the weak would abide by the rules. The strong would challenge the rules, overturn the rules, and then make new rules. It was very obvious that regardless of whether the rules set by the guardians of the heavenly gates were good or bad in Lin Yuan's eyes, they would not abide by them. In fact, even if the guardians of the heavenly gates entered the northern frontier, they could forget about using their power to oppress others in the other empires. In the northern frontier, not respecting the northern frontier laws was courting death. No one was an exception to this. After all, even an existence like the king of the northern frontier had to abide by the northern frontier laws. It could indeed convince the masses. Just like how Lin Yuan never believed in the rhetoric of everyone is equal and born free. If you felt that it was unfair for others to use the things that had been accumulated for generations, then you would be the one who broke the rules of equality. Lin Yuan's concept of equality was more inclined to the world of his previous life. Whether it was officials, wealthy merchants, civilians, or even monsters, no matter what industry they engaged in the Northern Frontier, they had to bear the Northern Frontier laws. If they made a mistake, they had to be punished regardless of their identity. The Confucian saying that no punishment can be meted out to scholar officials that was prevalent in other empires did not work in the Northern Frontier. Therefore, anyone with a discerning eye knew that the Northern Frontier had never intended to give the Guardians of the Heavenly Gates any face. Since the Guardians of the Heavenly Gates had gathered the most powerful group of the indigenous people of the Tianwu world, they had naturally seen through the intentions of the Northern Frontier long ago. However, in the end, no one dared to come out and meddle in the affairs of the Northern Frontier. Therefore, even if the Black Jiao broke the rules and attacked the Southern Wilderness and the Yun Nation, no one dared to stand up and criticize the Black Jiao. You want to take revenge on the Black Jiao and the Northern Frontier? No problem, you can just leave on your own. After a long time, the successor of the Yun Nation finally found out the reason why the Black Jiao attacked the Yun Nation imperial city from the old officials who were sick and did not come to the Night Dynasty that day. The previous emperor of the Yun Nation conspired with the demon venerable of the Southern Wilderness, intending to take control of the Hengduan mountain range while the whereabouts of the Beast Lord, Kirin, were unknown. In the end, they went for wool and came home shorn. Not only did they fail to take advantage of the Hengduan mountain range, but they also angered the Black Jiao, the Guardians of the Heavenly Gates. In a branch of the Azure River Empire, Song, who was dressed in red, gently raised his eyebrows. His jade-white right hand gently stroked his chin, and his long and narrow peach blossom eyes flickered with an unknown light. He suddenly realized that there seemed to be a loophole in his previous plan. He had underestimated the strength of the Black Jiao. It was not the first time that his original body had dealt with the host chosen by the Heavenly Tao origin. However, in the end, although those hosts grew at an astonishing speed, that was only the early stage. When they reached the step of being conferred a deity position, their progress was much slower than those small fries who were used as stepping stones in the past. Therefore, even though this war had lasted for countless years, Hongjun still firmly held the upper hand. The only time that Hongjun was threatened was when Luoho and the evil execution appeared. Even Hongjun himself could not fight against Luoho. He had to invite Yang Mei, Qin Kuan, Shi Chun, and other powerful people who had existed since the beginning of the prehistoric era to suppress Luoho. However, this time, he actually felt the terrifying pressure that Luoho and the evil execution had brought to the six sages from a Black Jiao who had not matured yet. If he did not plan, that treasure might not fall into his hands as expected after the completion of the Heavenly Tao origin. Chapter 1056. Two bolts of golden lightning struck down. Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly. He could feel the gaze that shrouded him. In other words, this was not the only gaze that fell on him. However, the other gazes were at most at the false god realm, which was the limit of the Tianwu world. Only this gaze, although the realm also stopped at the limit of the Tianwu world. When Lin Yuan carefully examined it, he could feel it terrifying like a vast ocean. It was as if he was not looking at a person, but an independent world. Without a doubt, this gaze should belong to the incarnation of the Tongtian sect's sect leader. I've gone too far, Lin Yuan muttered in his heart. It was not the first day that the incarnation of the Tongtian sect knew of his existence. However, it was obvious that the Tongtian sect's sect leader's personality was there. Even if he treated him as a potential enemy, on the surface, he was only at the level of a monster king. He was far from being a great enemy. However, he had just used a large amount of incense power, unlike before, when he had asked for help. This time it was Lin Yuan who had done it himself. Therefore, the incarnation of the Tongtian sect's sect leader would most likely focus on him. However, it did not matter. After all, once some plans were carried out, he had already stepped on the path of becoming the enemy of the entire world. Although it was impossible to become a true god in the Tianwu world, at the level of a false god, one could still absorb incense power and even rely on it to maintain one's body and soul in the world. achieving a kind of immortality effect. No, it could be said that this kind of immortality was a very glorious art of immortality in his previous world for a period of time. The small blue planet was just a small world that had evolved on its own after the heavenly Tao was separated from the chaos world. How could it gather so many gods and divine systems? Not to mention the 4 ancient civilizations. Just the Japanese claimed that there were 8 million gods. How ridiculous was that? Ever since Hong Jun had suppressed the Earth Tao and the human Tao, the true way to live forever had been cut off. The gods that appeared later were just like the fake gods of the Tianwu world. They relied on the power of faith and incense to live forever. This was also the reason why after the calamity, after the end of the world, the dusk of the gods, they no longer showed their divinity. This was because almost all of these gods had fallen into a deep slumber with the arrival of the end of the world. Those whose faith had been severed had even fallen. They would only be mentioned occasionally, but they had no chance to reappear in the world for the time being. It was hard to say when the martial heaven world's end of the world would arrive, but the number of these false gods was not small. Often, there would be tens of thousands of false gods dividing up a region. That was why the false gods of the martial heaven world couldn't compare to Lin Yuan when it came to using the power of incense. To be more precise, it wasn't that they couldn't fight against Lin Yuan or the experts he called over. It wasn't that they couldn't accumulate the power of incense with great difficulty over the past 20 years. Naturally, they would use it to ensure their own immortality. Other than Lin Yuan, who would be so extravagant as to use incense to fight, the Tao of the totem ancient gods was far stronger than the Tao of these false gods. In fact, the totem ancient gods were the true Tao of immortality. Otherwise, the winged dragon and the yellow emperor wouldn't have joined hands to fight for the world. Their goal was only to destroy the totem ancient gods in the world and take the power of incense for their own use. In the end, Hong Jun had suppressed the human Tao, and the winged dragon had taken advantage of the opportunity to trick the Yellow Emperor. After the Fushan Talisman fusion, the winged dragon had created the dragon totem and devoured the power of incense for himself, becoming an existence akin to a god of creation. It was really good that another powerful force had been destroyed by Hong Jun. As expected, the work of the system's host wasn't done by humans. Just thinking about it made him feel despair. However, as Lin Yuan and the venerable demon shouted across the sky, countless demonic beasts in the Hengduan mountain range were awakened. Black Jiao. Black Jiao. Why did he suddenly enter the Hengduan mountain range? Currently, all the demonic beast clans were fighting for the position of Beast Master. Although none of them were willing to give in, they all had one thing in common. That was, they all sent their most confident demonic beasts to guard the periphery of the Hengduan mountain range. Naturally, their goal was to stop the Black Jiao from entering the Hengduan mountain range. After all, the position of Beast Master was vacant. If the Beast Master Kirin had given a definite answer back then, it would have been easier to decide who would be the next Beast Master. However, the Beast Master Kirin's attitude back then was extremely ambiguous. Although all the demonic beast clans knew that he favored the Black Jiao, he had never publicly named the Black Jiao to take over the position of Beast Master. It was also because of this that they dared to fight for the position of Beast Master at this time. Although the Beast Master Kirin escaped with serious injuries, after all, no one really saw the Beast Master Kirin die. This also meant that the Beast Master Kirin might return to the Hengduan mountain range in the future. At that time, it wouldn't matter if he asked about it. After all, the new Beast Master had already been decided. Back then, he didn't name the Black Jiao to be the next Beast Master. However, a new problem appeared. Because the Beast Master Kirin didn't name anyone to take over the position, everyone wanted to fight for it. However, when the young talents of the various demonic beast clans were released to compare, other than those who overestimated their own abilities, there didn't seem to be much of a difference. When comparing the strength of each clan, there wasn't much difference. Therefore, the position of Beast Master had always been vacant. No one could gain an advantage. However, while they could fight for it, the Black Jiao couldn't. How long had it been since the Black Jiao was born? Not even 3 years. If placed in an ordinary demonic beast clan, at the age of the Black Jiao, most of them would still be young beasts that hadn't even developed their spiritual intelligence. However, the Black Jiao's cultivation was extremely high. How terrifying was the existence of the Demon King? Other than the beast Master Kirin, who had always been hiding his strength, and the ancestors of the demonic beasts who were sleeping all over the Hengduan mountain range, no one dared to proclaim that they could fight against the Demon King, let alone kill the Demon King. However, in terms of cultivation, not to mention the young demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range, even the older demonic beasts who were in charge of their own clans would have to bow down to him. Looking at how the northern frontier was governed in an orderly manner and was thriving day by day, one could see that the Black Jiao was indeed talented in governing the world. Moreover, since the decline of the Hengduan mountain range, the Black Jiao was the only demonic beast who had managed to expand into the humans' territory. In addition, with the existence of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce that couldn't be given up, it could be said that if the Black Jiao were to participate in the election, the other clans would have nothing to do with it. From the sound of it, the Black Jiao was a good candidate for the Beast Master position. However, the problem was the Black Jiao couldn't. He definitely couldn't become the next Beast Master. After all, with the Black Jiao's personality, he couldn't tolerate sand in his eyes. Not to mention the Green Swamp clan who had a grudge against the Black Jiao. Even the clans who didn't have any interactions with the Black Jiao wouldn't allow the Demonic Beast Palace to grow stronger under the governance of the Black Jiao. They wouldn't allow the Demonic Beast Palace to grow stronger and stronger under the governance of the Black Jiao. Chapter 1057. It was normal for them to have such thoughts. After all, the Hengduan mountain range had become an important bargaining chip that the various empires used to keep their opponents in check. Moreover, they were getting stronger and stronger. Naturally, they didn't need to work together to survive. At this moment, there was an additional retired emperor above them. That was something that no one wanted to see. Even the humans did not wish for another mighty lord like the Beast Lord, the Qilin, to appear in the world in the early years to rule over the various races of the Hengduan mountain range and conquer the Tianwu continent. Although the Hengduan mountain range's overall strength could not be compared to the six great empires, the six great empires who were like a sheet of loose sand and even hated each other would definitely not abandon everything and join forces to fight against the Hengduan mountain range before they were truly in a desperate situation. Therefore, even if they didn't care about the personal grudges, the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range wouldn't agree with Lin Yuan becoming the Beast Lord. This was because it wasn't a good thing for the Hengduan mountain range. It could even be said that once Lin Yuan became the Beast Lord, the Hengduan mountain range would be in trouble. In an instant, the group of demonic beasts rushed out of their nests towards the Stonetalan forest. At this moment, Li Zhongxing felt as if he had just woken up from a dream. He finally understood why the Dragon King added that they were prepared to fight against the demonic beasts. The demonic beasts in the periphery of the Hengduan mountain range couldn't threaten their campsite at all. After all, there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers from the northern frontier, far more than the 30,000 soldiers from the Yun Tiger Troop. In addition, they had set up their campsite and various defensive fortifications in advance. Even if all the demonic beasts near the northern frontier were summoned, they would only be killed by the defensive fortifications of this campsite, let alone the demonic beasts in the periphery of the Hengduan mountain range. The demonic beasts that the Dragon King mentioned were the powerful demonic beasts in the depths of the Hengduan mountain range. Those demonic beasts weren't something that the defensive fortifications of this campsite could withstand. In fact, it wouldn't be long before they had to engage in hand-to-hand combat with the demonic beasts in the depths of the Hengduan mountain range. In terms of the physique of their race, they were obviously at a disadvantage. But could they retreat? Obviously not. If he had only convinced the demon beasts of the Hengduan mountain range to attack the Frost Mirror grassland, why would the Dragon King gather so many troops from the northern frontier? The beast tide that erupted from the depths of the Hengduan mountains was within Lord Dragon King's expectations from the very beginning. In fact, the current situation was deliberately led by Lord Dragon King. But what was his goal? It's to show off our strength. Li Zhongxing's eyes suddenly flashed. He bit his lips and said, "Everyone, get ready to face the beast tide from the depths of the Hengduan mountains. Remember, even if you fight to the last man, even if you are on your last breath, you must continue to fight until the Dragon King gives the order. This is an order. In this battle, we must win, not lose. Li Zhongxing did not know much about the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range. In other words, his duty was not to suppress the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range. The Northern Frontier Army that was formed with Zhang Qilin as the leader was the real army to defend and attack the Hengduan mountain range. However, in the game with the Xinwu dynasty, he chose the Dragon King, and Zhang Qilin retained his blind loyalty to the Xinwu dynasty. Therefore, Zhang Qilin became a whetstone for the Dragon King's army of demonic beasts. However, Li Zhongxing still had some understanding of the demonic beasts. For example, the demonic beasts were a group of violent people who worshipped the strong. They also remembered to eat and not to be beaten. When there were enough benefits, they would even fight with demonic beasts that were several times stronger than them. The Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was the benefit that was enough to make the Hengduan mountain range and the Northern Frontier Army fight with their lives. Before they set off, he already understood the will of the Dragon King. The Dragon King was not interested in the position of Beast Master. At least, he was not interested in the position of Beast Master, which was like a peacemaker. However, the lack of interest in the position of Beast Master did not mean that the Northern Frontier Army would not clash with the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range. The purpose of their trip was to show off the strength of the Northern Frontier Army and let the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range understand one thing. The current Northern Frontier Army was no longer as weak as before. Even without the existence of the Dragon King, it was not something that the Hengduan mountain range could easily bully. If they wanted the benefits of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, they had to be prepared to fight to the death with the Northern Frontier Army. This battle in the Northern Frontier Army could only be won. Everyone, including Li Zhongxing, had to fight with the awareness that they would die. What Li Zhongxing did not know was that the empty position of Beast Master was originally a test set by the Beast Master Kirin. What the Qilin wanted was an ambitious Hengduan mountain range that was ready to attack the Tianwu world at any time. The next Beast Master would naturally not be able to maintain the quiet and inaction of the Qilin mountain range in its later years. Therefore, the demonic beast that was complacent because it had snatched the position of Beast Master would definitely not be the successor that the Qilin thought highly of. What it needed was a new king like Lin Yuan, who was disdainful of the position of Beast Master and was ready to find an opportunity to cleanse the Hengduan mountain range at any time and redefine the meaning of Beast Master. The Northern Frontier Army has a list of all trades and professions. This time, when I lead the army into battle, all the generals and soldiers are recorded in the list. After the battle, even if I die, the Northern Frontier Ministry of War will send people to the Hengduan mountain range to check the results of the battle. When the time comes, if the corpse is not found, as long as it is not in the list of survivors, it will be recorded as a deserter. According to the laws of the Northern Frontier, if a deserter's whereabouts are unknown, he will be wanted for life. If a deserter is caught, he will be killed without mercy. In addition, the family members of a deserter will be treated as criminals. They will not be able to enter the Northern Frontier Academy, not be able to work in any local government office, not be able to join the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, and not be able to enjoy the benefits of being a citizen of the Northern Frontier. Every troop has the right to supervise. If a deserter appears in their troop, they will be punished as a whole. If a deserter appears in each troop, one of the deserters will be punished as a deserter. However, the family members will not be implicated. If 3 or more deserters appear in each troop, they will be treated as deserters and will be punished according to the laws of the Northern Frontier. Li Zhongxing's voice sounded in the command channel. Instantly, many people's hearts sank. The Northern Frontier was indeed a place that was regarded as a paradise. The craftsmanship of all trades and professions was better than that of other dynasties. As long as one was talented, the officials of the Northern Frontier would provide for them to study in the Northern Frontier Academy. Even ordinary people had certain benefits in the Northern Frontier. At the very least, there was the concept of retirement in the Northern Frontier. When one reached a certain age, even if they no longer worked, the officials of the northern frontier would provide for these old people. Moreover, there were all kinds of work-related injury compensation, insurance, and the like. It could be said that as long as one was willing to work in the northern frontier, they would be able to live a good life. There was no need to worry about having no one to rely on or support the young. Of course, the prerequisite was that they did not violate the laws of the northern frontier. Chapter 10:58. Everyone had to abide by the laws of the northern frontier. However, the officials of the northern frontier never emphasized this because everyone in the northern frontier would subconsciously remember the provisions of the laws of the northern frontier. Although the laws of the northern frontier could be said to be numerous, they were not excessive. It would not require you to be a saint, but it would not allow you to degenerate into a scum who did not even have a bottom line. Moreover, not all the laws of the northern frontier required you to do something. Most of them were for protection. For example, if you worked for an aristocratic family and the aristocratic family was unwilling to pay you, you could go to the judicial office of the northern frontier. They would naturally help you to get back the payment you deserved. They would even help you to get a sizable amount of compensation based on the severity of the case. In addition, for disaster prevention such as theft and murder, which no one in other dynasties would be willing to deal with, as long as you reported a case to the northern frontier, not to mention the constables of the judicial office. Even the Association of the Demon Emperor and the embroidered uniform guards would send people to assist in the investigation. Moreover, in contrast to the numerous laws of the northern frontier, the officials of the northern frontier also took care of all the welfare of the citizens of the northern frontier. However, when you violated the laws of the northern frontier, it also meant that you and your immediate family would lose these corresponding benefits. Li Zhongxing rarely talked about the laws of the northern frontier because the military camp had its own military laws. However, no matter how strict the military laws were, it was impossible for everyone to obey them. However, after Li Zhongxing finished speaking, everyone realized one thing. If they deserted, even if they were lucky enough to survive, they would not be able to raise their heads in the future. They might even implicate their own family members if they could not escape. They could only fight. No matter who the opponent was, no matter how many opponents there were, they only needed to know two things: to kill the enemy and to survive. Li Zhongxing's actions stunned Lin Yuan slightly. Since when could the laws of the northern frontier be used to boost morale? It's so fancy. Lin Yuan muttered softly, but his mood was inexplicably much better. Entering the Hengduan mountain range this time was part of his plan, but from another perspective, he was also gambling. He bet that the soldiers of the northern frontier would definitely be able to defeat those angry demon beasts. If he won the bet, everything would be fine. No matter where Lin Yuan placed his pieces, it would be very easy. However, if he lost the bet this time, the price he had to pay would be equally tragic. For example, the northern frontier army that entered the Hengduan Mountains this time could be said to be all the manpower that could be mobilized by the northern frontier. If they were all buried here, all of Lin Yuan's subsequent actions would be restricted. It was true that the northern region was blessed by the power of the heavenly Tao. Whether it was the speed of the birth of talents or the growth of cultivators, it was far superior to the other forces. However, there was one thing that remained unchanged: population. The population of the northern frontier was limited. Even if there were immigrants from the Central Plains, the South, and even other dynasties, the population of the northern frontier still couldn't reach the peak of the Shenwu dynasty. Moreover, a considerable portion of mortals, as well as the old, weak, women, and children who couldn't fight, had to be excluded. Even if all aspects of the northern frontier were growing with each passing day, the population base was still there. As a result, the northern frontier had never carried out any military expansion. Apart from the Northern Frontier Army, Southern Expedition Army, and Falling Star Army, the Blackwater Army and Northern Frontier Dragon Cavalry were all selected from the Northern Frontier Academy and the demi-humans of the Northern Frontier. It wasn't that Lin Yuan didn't want to, but that the Northern Frontier couldn't handle a large expansion unless he could wait for the Northern Frontier to develop for another 10 or 20 years. However, time was clearly not on his side, because the world was about to be completed. Of course, Lin Yuan could create a large number of system creations, as well as a large number of grayscaled flood dragon people. However, putting aside the fact that the former would cost Lin Yuan a large amount of attribute points, the latter were monsters that couldn't be tolerated by the Tianwu continent. Just the time it would take for these two to mature was about the same as waiting for the northern frontier to develop on its own. Lin Yuan wasn't stupid enough to consider this kind of action that was like drinking poison to quench one's thirst. In particular, the amount of incense power needed to create these monsters was no different from using a knife to cut off a piece of flesh from Lin Yuan's body. The monsters in the Hengduan mountain range were both shocked and furious, while the soldiers of the northern frontier were also resolute. Both sides didn't even have the time to negotiate before they fiercely clashed against each other. Countless monsters fell to the crossbows in the process of charging, while countless soldiers of the northern frontier were sent flying by the monsters. In less than the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, the fortifications that took an entire day to build were completely destroyed. Even the sentry towers that the archers were standing on were destroyed by the monsters' techniques. In just the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, this battle had changed from a defensive battle to a field battle of close combat. The pungent smell of blood began to spread. At the same time, it attracted a large number of predators that could have stayed out of the battle. The gazes of Lin Yuan and the countless beast kings in the Hengduan mountain range were all fixed on this tragic battle. Blood flowed like a river, and corpses were strewn everywhere. Corpses of humans and monsters could be seen everywhere. Humans and monsters were in the midst of killing one another. Spiritual chi of various attributes constantly condensed, dissipated, became chaotic, calmed down, and condensed again, circulating in this world. Outside the Hengduan mountain range, there were also countless gazes observing this scene. What shocked the experts of the various dynasties was not the tragedy of the battle, but the terrifying fighting spirit of the soldiers of the northern frontier. What were they doing? Why were they doing this? They could not understand. At first, these soldiers of the northern frontier relied on the barracks to fight against the monsters. After the fortifications were destroyed, the battlefield directly expanded to the entire mountain range. When the crossbows in their hands ran out of arrows, they pulled out their demon swords to fight. When their spears and spears broke, they raised their shields to smash and smash. Later on, even their battle swords broke and bent. They began to hit, kick, and bite. Everyone's eyes were bloodshot, and their movements were swift and violent. Even if they knew that they would die, they would not hesitate to continue fighting. From the beginning to the end, not a single one of them ran away. Not a single one of them died with their backs facing the monsters. There was even a soldier of the northern frontier who was still biting his opponent's flesh when he was entangled by a python. Before his bones and tendons broke, he had forcefully bitten his opponent's 7 inches. The experts who witnessed all of this felt their hearts palpitate. The monsters of the Hengduan mountain range were also palpitating. These people were not humans at all. They were lunatics, devils, and existences that were more like monsters than monsters. No one knew what was supporting these soldiers of the northern frontier to fight so crazily. However, they could all see that the monster tide that had never retreated actually began to stagnate under the counterattack of these lunatics. It was as if they did not dare to fight against the other party anymore. Chapter 1059. It was worth mentioning that after reaching the heavenly strength realm, due to the qualitative change in the vital energy in the human body, their physical fitness would also increase by more than one level. This was especially so for Guan Zhaoshan, who had a special physique. After completing the qualitative change from the airborne realm to the heavenly strength realm, their physical fitness would increase by an even greater number. Therefore, even in a field battle, even if the humans were still at a disadvantage, it was not impossible for them to fight against the monsters. However, the physique was not the biggest shackle that prevented humans from defeating the monsters in a field battle. In ancient times, the ancestors of the monsters were much stronger and wilder than the monsters of today. At that time, humans did not have any strong cities or sharp weapons, but they were able to rely on their physical fitness and various weapons and tools that seemed extremely backward today to almost wipe out the entire group of monsters. The humans of today were living too comfortably. They lived behind the sturdy city walls, protected by all kinds of defensive equipment and formations. In the face of the demon beasts that were no longer as strong as their ancestors, they only needed to defend the cities at the border every year, and they would be able to harvest a large number of demon beast corpses. They had already lost the determination and passion to fight against the monsters in the field. This was unavoidable because of the degradation caused by the advancement of science and technology. However, no one had ever noticed this problem. Even if they had noticed it, they could not do anything about it. They could not tell the various dynasties and the high and mighty guardians of the heavenly gate to switch to the path of cultivation and stop adding skill points to the science and technology tree, right? Therefore, slowly, humans went from being at a disadvantage to being completely defeated in a field battle. It was almost a foregone conclusion. However, at the same time, countless years later, an army that had been established for less than a fraction of the time, as compared to the armies of the other dynasties, had fought to a stalemate with a terrifying beast tide that came from the depths of the Hungduan Mountains, the territory of the monster beasts. No, this might be a little biased. However, these incomparably valiant soldiers of the northern region had indeed fought against the demonic beasts in the field. They had even managed to stop the demonic beasts from advancing with their inexplicable courage and craziness. For a moment, the demonic beast could not even tell who was the ferocious demonic beast. This scene fell into the eyes of many people. At most, the high and mighty guardians of the heavenly gate were surprised. However, in the eyes of the top powerhouses of the six dynasties, it was not the case. There was a very interesting phenomenon in Lin Yuan's previous life. Every time the dynasty changed on the Asian continent, a powerful armed force would replace the once powerful but gradually declining armed force. It was the same even when the Yellow Emperor replaced the Yin Emperor. In other words, it was from the Yellow Emperor that the saying of conquest appeared when the imperial power of humans changed. Of course, the change of feudal imperial power was basically a game between the aristocratic families. Although there were peasant uprisings that swept the world, like the Great Ming Dynasty, it was very rare. Since ancient times, most peasant uprisings were used as training targets for the various dynasties. The more successful one was the Yellow Turban Uprising at the end of the Eastern Han Dynasty. Although it was still destroyed by the Eastern Han Dynasty, it ushered in a chaotic world. The decline of an armed force depended on many factors. For example, if a dynasty was established for too long and everything was tied to the wisdom of the emperor, there would be a lot of decadent and outdated rules. Even if there was a wise emperor, it would be difficult for him to compete with all the important ministers and aristocratic families in the world to abolish or change these decadent rules. A typical example was the Great Ming Dynasty. In the beginning, imperial power was supreme, but later on, civil and military officials competed with each other. Later on, power completely fell into the competition between the eunuchs and the Confucian scholars. Another example was when a dynasty had been stable for too long and suddenly encountered a strong enemy and suffered a loss. Those important ministers in the court swore to die and refused to submit, but later on, those who were stubborn were all killed. Only those who knew how to kneel and speak were left, and only those who knew how to pander to a strong enemy were left. A typical example was the Great Song Dynasty. In terms of population, wealth, and military power, even the Great Tang Dynasty could not compare to it. However, in foreign wars, the Great Song Dynasty had always been suppressed. These factors might have appeared in the Heaven Martial World before, but with the average lifespan of the people in the Heaven Martial World, the monitoring of the Heavenly Gate Guardians, the threat of the Hungduan Mountain Range, and the Endless Sea, it was not unreasonable for the seven great dynasties to exist for so many years. It was only in recent years that variables like Lei Qiuxing and Lin Yuan appeared. The most important thing was that the various great dynasties had never had a problem with their armaments. No matter which dynasty it was, they had fought many foreign wars. Every year, it was normal for them to fight against the Hungduan Mountain Range's beast tide. No one knew better than the top experts of the various dynasties what it meant to face an army more ferocious than the demonic beasts. This was especially true for the Qinjiang dynasty, which bordered the northern frontier. Even the natural barrier of the Great River was like a joke in front of the northern frontier. At this moment, they were all silent about the war between the northern frontier and the demonic beasts. For a long time, no one dared to say anything because they knew very well that if the northern frontier had any intention of destroying them, their country would be destroyed in a day's time. At the same time, Frost Mirror Khan, who had received the news, was also covered in cold sweat. Even the Shuangjian dynasty, which also did not build a strong city, did not dare to face the demonic beasts head-on like the northern frontier. They could only rely on the speed of their warhorses to continuously attack and exhaust or eliminate small groups of demonic beasts. They seemed to have unknowingly provoked an extremely terrifying enemy. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that although the northern frontier army had the upper hand for a while, it was only temporary. After all, this was the Hengduan mountain range. The demonic beasts seemed to be endless. Even if the six dynasties joined forces to attack, the demonic beasts would still feel a little overwhelmed. However, it did not mean that the demonic beasts were completely helpless. However, only the northern frontier army was here. This meant that the northern frontier army was fighting against the entire Hengduan mountain range's demonic beasts by themselves. Perhaps it would not be long before the demonic beasts that kept emerging from the Hengduan mountain range would completely destroy this seemingly unstoppable northern frontier army. For a moment, the experts of the six dynasties had mixed feelings. They did not know how to describe their feelings at this moment. Although the northern frontier was under the command of the Black Jiao, it was indeed divided into human dynasties. It was even decided that the seventh dynasty would be the northern frontier's allies. From the perspective of humans, they hoped that the northern frontier would win. Chapter 1060. However, the problem was that the actual ruler of the northern frontier was the Black Jiao. The northern frontier had indeed relied on the Hengduan mountain range to grow so quickly. In the eyes of the six dynasties, this was no different from a dogfight. If the actual ruler of the northern frontier was Li Zhong, the six dynasties would not hesitate at all. They would have gathered their troops and charged into the Hengduan mountain range to relieve the pressure on their allies. At the same time, they would have plundered the Hengduan mountain range ruthlessly. Therefore, from the perspective of these people, they hoped that the northern frontier army would lose. It was very contradictory and complicated. It's about time, right? Lin Yuan, who did not plan to care about the thoughts of the other forces, mumbled softly. His attack on the Hengduan mountain range this time was not just to show off to the monsters in the Hengduan mountain range. More importantly, he wanted to let those people understand that the current military strength of the northern frontier had reached the point where they could attack the Hengduan mountain range on their own. Next, the northern frontier would use the Shuangjian dynasty's invasion as an excuse to attack the Shuangjian dynasty en masse. They would basically take over a large area of territory, and no one would dare to raise any objections. They would even have to think about whether they would become the next target of the northern frontier if they did so. If it was a battle between two dynasties, those dynasties that were further away could naturally take sides. However, it was different for the northern frontier. The army of the northern frontier could pass through the Hengduan mountain range at any time. This natural barrier that the other dynasties were helpless against was the best route for the northern frontier to send troops. Apart from the Qinjiang dynasty and the Shuangjian dynasty, the other four dynasties were also within the northern frontier's attack range. Soon, another monster horde formed by monsters appeared on the battlefield. However, the main body of this monster horde was basically the mountain-shaking ape, nine-colored deer, diamond ape, and other monsters from the Stoneclaw forest. In other words, these were all Lin Yuan's subordinates. What was even more interesting was that even though the Stoneclaw forest was located in the outer region of the Hengduan Mountains, after the recent changes, the demonic beasts under the Beast Lord Kirin and the three Beast Kings broke out of the encirclement and disappeared one after another. Furthermore, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce deliberately gave resources to these demonic beasts, and the Northern Frontier Ministry of Works created equipment for these demonic beasts. These demonic beasts in the tribes near the Stoneclaw Forest could be considered one of the top demonic beasts in the Hungduan Mountains. When they gathered together, even those large demonic beasts with countless years of history would have to bow their heads. When human technology was combined with even more ferocious and valiant demon beasts, the demon beasts in the vicinity of the Stoneclaw Forest had already become existences in a different dimension compared to the other demon beasts. If even a human wearing a variety of equipment could contend against a demonic beast, then how terrifying would a demonic beast wearing custom-made equipment be? Not long after, another beast horde charged into the battlefield. The leader was a pitch-black ape with hands that looked like prawn pincers. That was Moro, the first demon beast created by Lin Yuan, or rather the Inferno demon beast. Behind it was a mighty army of Inferno demon beasts that were born in the Scarlet Flame Swamp. Although Lin Yuan hadn't set foot in the Hungduan Mountains for a long time, he had never stopped making arrangements in the Hungduan Mountains. He had already done something like showing off his muscles, so it wouldn't be good if he continued to hide it. Before the various forces could recover from their shock, another group of cavalrymen appeared in the vicinity of the Demon Beast Forest. These cavalrymen basically had some beast characteristics on their bodies. The armor they wore and the weapons they held in their hands were all products of the Northern Frontier Ministry of Works. The demon beasts under their command were mainly horses, deer, and wolves. They were all demonic beasts that lived on the side of the Demon Beast Forest near the northern frontier. Although it had long been known that Black Jiao had been secretly subduing the demonic beasts, such as Kagura, Shaoin, and other outstanding demonic beasts, all of them had basically taken refuge under Lin Yuan's command. No one knew how many demonic beasts there were under Lin Yuan's command. But today, these demonic beasts from the northern frontier directly showed their weapons. There are so many of them. There are at least 500,000 of them. It's almost the total combat power of the demonic beasts from the entire northern frontier. An expert from Xinjiang who was watching the battle sucked in a breath of cold air. He gritted his teeth and said, "If our intelligence system is correct, then all the demonic beasts from the northern frontier have taken refuge under Black Jiao's command. Even some of the demonic beast forests near the northern frontier are the same. Many of the demonic beast forest warhorses are the specialties of the Frost Mirror Grassland. They are the warhorses of the Frost Mirror Cavalry, which is not something that can be bought with money. There must be some demonic beasts that help the Frost Mirror Cavalry to raise horses that have taken refuge in the northern frontier." The demonic beast's sudden appearance caught everyone off guard. Who would have thought that Black Jiao, who had been operating the northern frontier and was even active in the Endless Sea not long ago, had unknowingly taken in all the demonic beasts nearby? They also didn't know why the number of demon beasts under Lin Yuan's command far exceeded the detailed number reported by their intelligence personnel. At this moment, they only knew one thing. The Hungduan Mountains were in trouble. Moreover, the Shuangjin dynasty, which was currently attacking the northern frontier, was also in trouble. But the problem was, they could ignore the demon beasts in the Hungduan Mountains. But could they ignore the barbarians in the Frost Mirror Prairie? Yes. Everyone had to admit that the Shuangjin barbarian, who seemed to have a screw loose in their heads and only knew how to kill and plunder, did not have a good relationship with others. This was especially true for the Xinwu dynasty and the Kumu dynasty, which were neighboring the Frost Mirror Prairie. They couldn't wait to tear the barbarians in the prairie apart. Even if the Shuangjin dynasty didn't border the Frost Mirror Prairie, whose caravans hadn't been robbed and killed by the barbarians. Many tribes on the Frost Mirror Grassland had been wiped out by some powerful forces because they had robbed something they shouldn't have and killed someone they shouldn't have. At the very least, they would find quests in the mercenary guild to wipe out these tribes. But while the barbarians were detestable, their nomadic customs also limited their range of activity. If they didn't have the terrain of the grasslands, the combat strength that the barbarians could display would be nothing compared to the demonic beasts when they fought in positional warfare and mountainous warfare. Ignore it? Watch the Black Jiao devour the Frost Mirror Prairie? But even if they did, it would be useless. After all, no matter how fast the cultivators could run, they couldn't reach the battlefield immediately. Besides, the cultivators in the military weren't very strong individually. They mainly practiced all kinds of battle formations and joint attacks. 80% of them would be exhausted if they tried to fly to the northern land or the frost mirror grassland from their own territory like ordinary cultivators. If they ran into a ferocious army like the northern land, wouldn't they be lining up to deliver their heads to the enemy? Wouldn't that give the Black Flood Dragon an excuse to attack them after they delivered their heads to the enemy? Chapter 1061. Even the Azure River Empire, which was the closest, didn't dare to bare their fangs at the northern frontier. After all, no one knew what the Hungwan mountain range or the Xuanjin dynasty would think after the northern frontier showed its power. However, everyone in the Azure River Empire, from the emperor to the civil and military officials, was afraid. What did an army that could fight head-on with the demonic beast deep in the Hungwan mountain range mean? It meant that once this army set foot in the Azure River Empire's territory, no one in the entire Azure River Empire's army would be able to withstand two moves, relying on the cities and defense equipment to stall for time until reinforcements arrived. What a joke! Did they really think that the demon venerable from the southern wilderness had been hiding in the southern wilderness for so many years because it didn't have any ambition? If it didn't have any ambition, it wouldn't have created any money-squandering dens or gentle villages. It hadn't moved for so many years only because it was suppressed by the Azure River Empire and the Qian Empire. In addition, there were some heavenly gate guardians with ambiguous attitudes, which made the demon venerable from the southern wilderness afraid of attacking the rat for fear of breaking the vases. However, it had done a lot of things to harm the two empires in secret. Otherwise, the truth of the gentle villages wouldn't have been exposed. No one knew exactly how terrifying the Black Jiao's background was, but what was certain was that the Heavenly Gate Guardians probably didn't even have the guts to face it head-on, let alone punish it. They were afraid that they would be crushed to death by some big boss that popped out of nowhere. Therefore, riding on the momentum of the Black Flood Dragon, the Southern Wasteland came out in full force and bit off a piece of meat from the Azure River Empire. Wasn't this a normal thing? Everyone knew what had happened in the Qian Empire recently. From the emperor to the officials, they were all killed by the Black Jiao's divine thunder. Fortunately, there were still local officials, sects, and aristocratic families. Otherwise, the Qian Empire, which had a long history, would have been destroyed by the Black Jiao's divine thunder. Under such circumstances, the southern wilderness had already taken action and at least robbed 2 counties and 17 cities from the Qian Empire. If it weren't for the demon venerable being injured, this result might have been more than 3 times greater. Long-term vision and structure? How could those things compare to the benefits in front of him? Even the demon master himself did not believe that Black Jiao had the ability to kill him. After all, the Black Jiao had paid a huge price to summon 2 bolts of divine thunder from the Hungwan Mountains. If both bolts of divine thunder hit the demon master, or if the demon master was stabbed, the demon master would probably be finished. Since the Black Jiao did not do so, it meant that the Black Jiao could not afford that price. The Southern Wasteland venerable monster, who had never lost since his rise, naturally cultivated an invincible aura. Even this time, he only admitted that Black Jiao's methods were strange, but he never thought that he would lose to the Black Jiao. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said such harsh words to the Black Jiao. At this moment, the Qinjiang Empire did not even dare to support the Xuanjin dynasty, let alone support them. At least the Xuanjin dynasty could still put up a fight against the fierce army of the northern frontier. However, if it was the Qinjiang Empire, they would be bitten to death by the northern frontier. Of course, at this moment, countless people were wondering about another thing. Where was the Sky Demon? What was the Sky Demon doing? The Sky Demon had experts on his side. Why didn't he take advantage of such a good opportunity to attack the northern frontier when he knew that the main force of the northern frontier was fighting with the demonic beasts of the Hungwan Mountains and the Border Defense Army was fighting with the Frost Mirror Grassland? Why was he wandering in the almost empty south of the Xinwu dynasty? Could it be that the Black Jiao had done something in secret? This was not impossible because the Black Jiao was currently attacking the Hungwan Mountains. Although the Great Wall of the northern frontier was isolated from the other forces by the formation, The northern frontier had been established for a long time after all. All the forces had a clear understanding of the military strength of the northern frontier. At this moment, the northern frontier was not empty, but it was definitely not in a good condition. What gave the Black Jiao the courage? How could he ignore the border defense and directly attack the Hungguan Mountains when the Sky Demon and the Xuanjin Barbarian were waiting for him? Moreover, why did the central plains of the Xinwu dynasty and the Sky Demon in the south not attack the northern frontier? It couldn't be that the two sides had inexplicably reached some secret agreement, right? This was not very possible. If it were them, if they were in existence like the Sky Demon that could not be killed, they would definitely destroy the northern frontier at all costs if they encountered the northern frontier that could kill them. Even if they did not have such an opportunity, they would constantly create opportunities. How could they let the northern frontier grow? Unfortunately, the natives of the Tianwu world were destined to not understand the reason. Only Lin Yuan, Yang Mei, and the incarnation of the sect leader of Tongtian, whose alias was Tsang, knew. The Sky Demon was an existence created by the Nether River ancestor, with the water of the Nether Blood Sea mixed with his own negative emotions. It was immortal and did not have a physical body. It was filled with all kinds of negative emotions. This was the characteristic of the Nether Blood Sea. Therefore, there was not much difference between the Sky Demon and Lin Yuan's Nether River creatures. Even if there was a difference, it was because Lin Yuan's use of the Nether Realm's black water was not as good as the Nether River ancestors' use of the Nether Blood Sea. Therefore, although the Sky Demon seemed incomparably ferocious, except for a few second-generation Sky Demons, they did not have their own intelligence. They completely followed the orders of their creator. For example, the Nether River ancestor could follow the rules of the Heavenly Gate Protector to first focus on the northern frontier. Later, when he saw that the situation was not right, he moved his main force to the south. However, what happened next forced the Nether River ancestor to temporarily cut off his connection with the Sky Demon. First, the will of the world and the incomplete source of the heavenly Tao worked together to protect Lin Yuan and fought with Hongjun's projection. In the end, Hongjun took the initiative to leave the Tianwu world. Second, the world was about to be repaired. The secret of the Tianwu world's birth was very likely to be revealed at this time. Therefore, the sect leader of Tongtian would definitely not allow other forces to interfere with his treasure hunt. He could not do anything to Yang Mei, Taoist Red Cloud, Hamba, or Lin Yuan. However, this was originally part of his plan. He would definitely not allow the Nether River ancestor to interfere. Third, although Hongjun's projection disappeared from the Tianwu world in a flash, the aura that leaked out still attracted the Yang Mei ancestor who had been cultivating in the Sea of Bitterness. Fourth, after the Yang Mei ancestor came, although she did not catch Hongjun who had left the chaotic world, she discovered the secret of the Tianwu world. She did not know where she captured two fox demons, but they were killed by Lin Yuan. Then, she put the weight on Lin Yuan. She had been cultivating in the Sea of Bitterness outside the Heavenly Gate. With such a powerful person keeping watch, how would the Nether River ancestor dare to come? Therefore, the Sky Demon did not take the opportunity to attack the northern frontier. Chapter 1062. Since everyone is here, let's not rest. Our target is the Monster King's court. Anyone who blocks our way will be killed without mercy. Lin Yuan calmly added the Inferno beasts, the northern frontier beasts, and the demi-human army into his command system. Then, he decisively gave the order to continue forward. When the allied army killed the remaining beasts and began to move towards the Monster King's court, he brought Lin Yuan to the battlefield that was still filled with the pungent smell of blood. After Lin Yuan set foot on the battlefield, his face revealed an excited expression. He was panting like a pervert. After all, the battlefield was filled with the smell of blood. In addition, there were broken limbs all over the ground. To any intelligent life, this place was like hell. However, it was the most suitable environment for Azuras. Just by standing in such a place, an Azura would enter a frenzied state of battle. It was similar to the kind of adrenaline rush that was surging. And this was also the reason why Lin Yuan brought Lin Yuan to this battlefield. Azuras. They would not rest until death. They were brave and fearless. They were crazy and passionate warriors. Such an army was not something that anyone could refuse. Even if there was no environment like the Azura realm that could allow Azuras to be reborn endlessly, the Azura realm would be created sooner or later. The more Azuras there were, the earlier the Azura realm would appear. At that time, even if Azuras had died in battle, they would be able to return from the Azura realm. Compared to the so-called Undying, Azuras were the real Undying army. They were also the trump card that Lin Yuan needed to have when he planned to conquer the myriad worlds in the future. Relying on the incense power produced by the sky martial world to fight against Hongjun, the ruler of the great desolate era, who had at least 33 layers of heaven in the heavenly court, was not a F***king battle. It was like smashing an egg against a rock. Conquering the myriad worlds, Lin Yuan lowered his head in silence, an inexplicable light flashing in his eyes. In his previous life, he was a very smart person. After taking over his family's business, he was able to expand rapidly without breaking the law and become a well-known enterprise in the city. He was only a step away from being listed and collectivized because he didn't have the right opportunity and the right investors. Then, he ushered in a life that could be described as a nightmare. After that, in order to take revenge, he began to learn all kinds of skills, including but not limited to languages, hand-to-hand combat, firearms use, hacker technology, disguise, tracking, and anti-tracking. Lin Yuan's talent wasn't weak in the first place in his previous life, and under the pressure of hatred that made people go crazy with each passing day, he had almost turned himself into an ice-cold machine. Every day, he spent his time learning and training as if he was torturing himself. After that, he trained a new body and underwent plastic surgery. Even his voice was changed through surgery. Sometimes, after drinking and looking at himself in the mirror, he didn't even recognize himself. After that, he found a suitable opportunity to infiltrate the target side. Unfortunately, before he could make a move, because of some accident, he exposed himself. After that, he chased to kill, escaped, hid, continued to investigate, and chased to kill. At the end of his memory, when he couldn't even muster a trace of strength, he fell into a coma. When he woke up again, he was already in the sky martial world. Lin Yuan boasted that he wasn't a kind person, but when it was within his power, he didn't mind doing a few good deeds. After coming to the sky martial world, he realized how wrong he was. Sometimes a small act of kindness could bring about a disaster that could topple the heavens. He could even think back to his previous life. If it wasn't for the backstabbing of the company's executives, he wouldn't have been able to react before being utterly defeated by the other party. Even if he managed to stabilize the situation with great difficulty, the other party still managed to find the address of his family through these traitors, giving him a fatal blow when he was on the verge of collapse. Now that he thought about it, why did those executives dare to betray him? Was it just because the other party offered a high enough price? It was only because he was a little too gentle in his previous life that those people had the guts to betray him. Then, knowing the whole process, they took the other party's offer as a bargaining chip and made an invalid defense for the other party in court. They had completely forced him onto a path that he would never have taken in the past. After coming to the sky martial world, he had seen too much of the law of the jungle. He had learned how to dance on the tip of a knife. Lin Yuan had done many things, killed many people who didn't need to die. If his previous self were to evaluate him, the current him would definitely be evaluated as an inhumane lunatic with no bottom line, a butcher, a demon. Back then, when he faced the young miss of the Liu family, Lin Yuan could protect her. After that, when he made an exchange with Guan Zhaoshan, when he faced Lei Qiuming, spiritual master He, and the Flying Star Sect's eldest senior brother, he was still angry. This made him feel that he was still human. But thinking back, when he started to lose his kindness and humanity, it wasn't in the sky martial continent. It was when he walked out of the court that day and saw his enemy, who was clearly guilty but was acquitted with all kinds of evidence, smiling at him with contempt. He couldn't be considered a human anymore, right? But now, all the sins he had committed, all the schemes he had hatched, were all for the sake of returning to the world of his previous life, and then trampling on his enemy, making him sink into the black water of the underworld realm and experience the pain he had experienced, until the end of everything. In the process, how many people had he become the enemy of? He didn't know, and he didn't want to know, but he was very clear that as time passed, more and more people would treat him as an irreconcilable enemy. So he couldn't have the slightest bit of kindness or weakness. He had to give up what he had to give up and kill what he had to kill. Even if he had no interest in conquering the 10,000 worlds, he had to do it, and he had to do it to the best of his ability. This was the only growth that the lessons of his previous life had given him. I'm really a sinner. Fortunately, I'm no longer human. Lin Yuan laughed self-deprecatingly, then turned his head to the excited Lin Yuantu and said indifferently, I brought you here to let you do things, not to let you smell the blood like a pervert and be intoxicated. Can you give me an answer? If not, we will go directly to the next target point. Don't waste time here. Yes. Why not? It's simply too good. The excitement on Lin Yuantu's face didn't diminish at all. He slowly spread out his hands, and blood-red Azura demon chi gathered in his palms to form a blood-red ball of light. Wisps of Azura demon chi flowed out from the ball of light, falling into the mountain of corpses, the sea of blood, and the broken limbs. Chapter 1063. Li Zhongxing's act of using the Northern Frontier's law to boost morale was enough to make Lin Yuan clap his hands and applaud. But in reality, Li Zhongxing's words were no different from a fart. Where's this place? This is the Hengduan mountain range. This is the hotbed of monster beasts. The smell of blood on this battlefield was so strong that even the wind couldn't blow it away. On the contrary, the smell of blood that was blown away by the mountain wind would attract countless hungry predators. Let alone tomorrow. Even if the Northern Frontier search team set out now, by the time they arrived at this battlefield, they would only see bones and minced meat all over the ground. This didn't even include the soldiers of the Northern Frontier who were torn apart and crushed by the monster beasts during the battle. But fortunately, Lin Yuan had set up a name in the command system. Every dead soldier's name would be grayed out in the command system. After returning to the Northern Frontier, they would know who died in the battle and who deserted. Well, in any case, so far, only the soldiers of the Northern Frontier who died in the battle didn't leave the battlefield without permission. This point, Lin Yuan, who was in the state of the Eye of God, saw it clearly. However, Li Zhongxing was still a crazy person in the end. He didn't clean up the battlefield after the battle ended. Under Lin Yuan's command, he hurriedly led a large number of troops and began to march towards the Monster Beast Palace. He didn't even leave behind a group of people to deal with the corpses here, with the tragic degree of this battlefield. If the corpses here weren't dealt with, in less than half a month, this old battlefield would turn into a plague source. Who knew how much damage it would bring to the Northern Frontier and the Hengduan mountain range? However, could this be considered normal? After all, Shun Lin Jun had always been an invincible existence. From the beginning to the end of the battle, not many of them would die. Moreover, cleaning up the battlefield and dealing with the corpses were dirty and tiring work that definitely wouldn't be done by troops like Shun Lin Jun. Therefore, Li Zhongxing, who came from Shun Lin Jun, really didn't have the concept of dealing with the corpses after the battle. Even if his subordinates who graduated from the Northern Frontier Military Academy noticed this, they didn't have time to tell Li Zhongxing before they received the order to move out. Lin Yuan's trip was naturally to deal with these corpses. As Lin Yuantu's demon chi continued to leak out, the corpses on the ground began to wriggle. Not long after, monsters with black or red skin gathered together from the original corpses and minced meat, forming monsters of different shapes and sizes. At least some of them still retained their human form, but they looked scarred. Some of their limbs were even replaced by beast claws. They didn't even have the concept of limbs anymore. Although they weren't at the level of the 1,000 arms Azura, 5 or 6 arms could be considered basic. There were also some who maintained the posture of a monster beast, but there were a few more human arms and legs on their backs. Lin Yuan looked at these newborn Azuras. He didn't know where to start cursing in his heart. It wasn't a joke to say that Azuras belonged to the 6 paths of the netherworld. Sure enough, those handsome Azuras in novels were all made up. Looking at these newborn Azuras, Lin Yuan really wanted to ask them what they had to do with the stitched monsters in some of his favorite works. There was a reason why this race was so ugly. When the Azuras stood up one after another and lined up before Lin Yuan just looked at Lin Yuan speechlessly. The coldness in his eyes was so cold that it was almost tangible. Lin Yuan shrugged and then snapped his fingers. These strange Azuras began to kill each other without any warning. Then, the battle in front of him went from a fight to a massacre. The surviving Azuras began to become more and more powerful. When there were only about 500 Azuras left, Lin Yuan snapped his fingers again. Then, this fight that happened without any warning stopped without any warning. Lin Yuan smelled the pungent smell of blood in the air and looked at the Azuras, who had reached the late stage of the airborne realm on average. He then looked down at the minced meat on the ground and then looked at Lin Yuan too. Lin Yuan spread his hands helplessly and said, "The Azura demonic chi can infect anything into Azuras, or it can absorb the power of the target and gradually turn them into lunatics. However, the Azura demonic chi can only be used on the same target once. I've already awakened these corpses once. It's useless to put more Azura demonic chi into them." At this point, his eyes fell on the Azuras when they were still alive. He smirked and said, "But with them around, wouldn't it be easy to slaughter some small tribes living in the monster forest or the periphery of the Hengduan Mountains? By then, there will only be more and more Azuras under your command, and they will become stronger and stronger. Then go ahead and do it." Lin Yuan glanced at Lin Yuntu indifferently and immediately added, "Remember, kill them all. The ecological balance in the Hengduan Mountains is very fragile. Instead of causing an ecological imbalance, it is better to clean it up directly and wait for the demonic beasts from other places to migrate over. Then, remember to clean up the corpses as well. When there are no more demonic beasts nearby that can be slaughtered, turn around and go to the Qian dynasty to teach them how to face the northern region." The monsters under the command of the northern frontier had already set off for the monster palace. The weak cubs had already been escorted to the northern frontier by the association of the Monster Emperor. As such, even if Lin Yuan were to kill the entire Hengduan Mountains at this moment, there would not be any casualties. He would also not have any psychological burden because of such an order, because this was the first lesson that the Tianwu world had taught him. Being weak would only lead to death. In his previous life, he had lived in a legal and civilized world. Even though there was a lot of darkness under the light, it was this kind of light that protected the majority of people so that they did not have to live in a bloody world. Even though it was the opposite, Lin Yuan was still grateful for the environment that he had lived in his previous life. However, in a world like the Tianwu world, being weak would lead to death. It was a very normal thing. Other than Lin Yuan, who had come from another world, who initially found it strange and soundproof, everyone, from the false gods to the mortals, felt that it was natural. Since he did not have the ability to change the entire world, he could only change himself. Let it be natural. At least, that was the case for now. Hearing Lin Yuan's order, Lin Yuan, who had been smiling excitedly, seemed to grin even wider. He did not know whether it was an illusion or not. Chapter 1064. Northern Frontier Army, Northern Frontier Monster Beasts, Inferno Monster Beasts, Demi-Human Tribe, Original Monster Beast Palace. When these 5 forces gathered together, it only meant one thing. Before they arrived at the Monster Beast Palace, they were absolutely invincible against the giant monster clans that had been passed down for countless years. This army followed Lin Yuan's orders without any rest or mercy. They set off from the Stenetlan Forest and chose the shortest route to the Monster Beast Palace. They didn't even bother to negotiate with the monster clans that they met along the way. As long as the clans behind them had nothing to do with the northern frontier, the entire army went straight to them. Along the way, they slaughtered no less than 37 monster clans. Even the monster beasts of the desolate monster realm that were once on par with the 3 monster kings in the Hengduan Mountains were killed by them. Just like the humans, the monster clans have been living a peaceful life for a long time. They even forgot when was the last time they suffered such a heavy loss. It was as if they were still on land back then. They were chased all the way to the Hungduan Mountains. Only when they reached the Hungduan Mountains did they manage to gain a foothold in the Hungduan Mountains. They imitated the humans and pushed out the Monster Beast Palace, choosing a ruler called Monster King. The monsters had been suppressed in the Hungduan Mountains for countless years. As the Monster King Kirin ascended to the throne, the monsters finally revealed their true strength. Although they couldn't restore the glory of their ancestors, they were able to gain a firm foothold in the Hungduan Mountains. For example, the Shenwu dynasty and other weaker dynasties didn't even dare to go deep into the Hungduan Mountains to hunt. They only dared to hunt near the Monster Beast Palace. But this time, the attack from the northern frontier made the monsters who had been living a peaceful life for a long time realize that war was coming. The monsters and soldiers of the northern frontier, riding on monsters, wearing heavy armor, and holding all kinds of weapons were not something that normal monsters could stop with their flesh and blood. Even before these knights started to charge, there would be a group of huge monsters that didn't have any knights, but were also wearing heavy armor, such as rhinoceroses, wild bulls, forest elephants, and so on. This kind of feeling, it was like two armies facing each other. Just as you were about to set up your chariots, horses, and cannons, your opponent directly raised the city wall and charged at you. After this round of charging, even if there were some monsters that were lucky enough to survive, before they could get up, the knights behind them would immediately roar and charge at them with weapons that could be used as battering rams. Once again, the monsters that had been plowed on one side would be plowed on the other side. Usually, after this round of attack, no matter whether they died or not, they would be turned into meat paste. Want to run away? The archers of the Northern Territory and the demonic beasts that specialized in long-range demonic arts were not just for show. The specially made astral-piercing crossbows had a certain suppressive effect on demonic power. Even if the demonic beasts had rough skin and thick flesh, they still could not compare to those who wore iron armor. In the face of the divine mechanical crossbows, which could create a rain of arrows with just a pull of the trigger, the demonic beasts were like wheat being harvested in autumn. Of course, there were also the careful human knights and demi-human knights of the northern frontier. They constantly patrolled around the battlefield, surrounding and killing the monsters that tried to escape or approach the battlefield. They didn't fight head-on. Instead, they used their long lances and crossbows to make the monsters pay a terrible price. If the monsters were particularly lucky, for example, if they weren't in the path of the 2 rounds of charging and weren't within the attack range of the knights and archers, they could naturally choose to play dead. However, there was no doubt about this because the northern frontier infantry that followed closely behind would use all kinds of long weapons and monster-catching nets to deal fatal damage to every monster's corpse while ensuring absolute safety. They couldn't run away, they couldn't run over, they couldn't even play dead. F***ck, so annoying. This was the thought of all the commanders of the monster clans who led the monsters under their command in an attempt to stop the attack of the Northern Frontier Coalition Army. However, in Lin Yuan's opinion, this kind of crushing attack wouldn't last for too long, as he had been tailing behind the Northern Frontier Coalition Army. From the moment Lin Yuan and Lin Yuan-tu arrived at the first battlefield, the great monsters of the Hungduan mountain range had used some unknown method to block the prying eyes of outsiders. Even Lin Yuan's Eye of God was affected and couldn't see everything clearly. He could only reluctantly follow the movements of the Northern Frontier Army. This was also because of the existence of the command system built by the power of incense. However, after all, he had fought so many battles big and small. With Lin Yuan's aptitude, other than his own cultivation, he learned everything very quickly. Therefore, Lin Yuan himself already had a certain level of military literacy. He wasn't sure if Li Zhongxing had noticed it or not, but as an outsider, he wouldn't be blinded by the victory. Instead, he keenly noticed that the closer they got to the Monster King's court, the more demonic beasts were guarding the roads. Moreover, the demonic beasts' troop types were getting more and more complicated. It was obvious that the big clans had already joined forces. Moreover, they seemed to have chosen the Monster King's court as their gathering point. In the following journey, the Northern Frontier Coalition Army would probably have a harder time winning. they would also start to suffer casualties. When they arrived outside the monster imperial court, there would most likely be a fierce battle, with at least a 50% chance of winning waiting for them. Should I continue to increase the stakes? It feels very dangerous. Lin Yuan, who was following behind, thought to himself. As he flew, he brainstormed. This time, the display of strength was already very exaggerated. The valiance of the Northern Frontier Army, the monsters with custom-made equipment, the inferno monsters that obeyed orders, and all the demi-human tribes living in the Northern Frontier. These bargaining chips were already enough to make the various empires' attitude towards the Northern Frontier Army unclear. But if he continued to increase the stakes, there was a saying in his previous life. The fear of humans often came from the unknown. But sometimes, if you knew too much, it would instead give people a huge psychological pressure. Under this kind of pressure, humans who didn't have enough endurance would only go crazy. And if the natives of the sky martial world went crazy, they would most likely disregard everything and form an army to attack the Northern Frontier. They would probably hold the thought that no matter what, they would first have to deal with the Northern Frontier Army. Otherwise, no one would be able to have a good night's sleep. Although the Hungduan mountain range was disturbed by an unknown power, and the experts of the outside world were unable to spy on it, no one would be so naive to think that only the Northern Frontier Army had cooperated with the monsters. For example, the remaining members of the Jiao clan, Heaven's Justice Army, and other forces had secretly cooperated with the monsters. It was just that they weren't as close as the Northern Frontier Army, and they didn't do it openly. Chapter 1065. However, regardless of the relationship between these forces and the Hungduan Mountains, there was one thing that was certain. The overall strength of the Alliance army that attacked the Hungduan Mountains from the northern frontier would definitely be leaked. After all, the existence of the skylight was not just for show. Previously, when they intercepted and killed the intelligence personnel from the northern frontier, the skylight had contributed. Who could guarantee that there were no members of the skylight among the monsters in the Hungduan Mountains? Therefore, this was the problem that Lin Yuan found troublesome. Should he raise the stakes or not? He was not someone who gambled heavily. He would only make decisions that were similar to gambling when necessary. Right now, he knew that the monsters in the Hungduan Mountains would gather near the Monster King's court and then fight head-on with the Alliance army of the northern frontier. However, the other party had sent out so many monsters to obstruct the northern frontier. On one hand, it was to delay the marching speed of the northern frontier so that more monsters would gather near the mountain range named King's Court. On the other hand, it was also to use the time these monsters were destroyed and the number of casualties they caused to the Alliance army of the northern frontier to deduce the overall strength of the Alliance army of the northern frontier. Lin Yuan had never doubted that this mountain range that was full of secrets was so powerful. After all, in the underwater secret realm, the inherited memory that Lin Yuan obtained was not so simple. Although he never actively recalled the existence of the inherited memory, it was still a super big shot who lived in ancient times, and most likely a dragon bloodline demon beast. Otherwise, the central area of the underwater secret realm would not only be accessible to those with dragon bloodline, but also to those with dragon bloodline to obtain the inherited memory inside. Only God knew how many of such existences were lurking in the Hungduan Mountains. Only God knew how many of such existences were still alive, like the few ancestral dragons from the Four Seas Dragon Clan. It was still the same sentence. The foundation of the Hungduan Mountains was laid out here, and there was no human who did not covet it. In Lin Yuan's eyes, the reason why the Heavenly Gate Guardians, who were cowardly and greedy, did not touch the Hungduan Mountains was definitely not just to leave the Hungduan Mountains and stabilize the power structure of the Seven Empires. As for how many old monsters there were, perhaps only those old monsters themselves knew. He still had other cards in his hands. For example, the two armies that were modeled after the Western fantasy demons and the undead had yet to be deployed. If these two armies were included, then the strength of the northern frontier might not be able to expand to the point where they could sweep through the Hungduan mountain range. However, if they could follow the Stoneclaw Forest and directly attack the Monster King's court, there would be no problem at all. But none of those old monsters had expressed their stance yet. The Eye of the God was not completely unusable, but the prerequisite was to use the power of Joss flames and not demonic power. This meant that the existence that blocked the Eye of the God was also using the power of Joss flames and could only use a power of the same level to offset it. Lin Yuan also roughly estimated the approximate area that was blocked. He dared not say much, but it was definitely more than 60,000 miles. To block such a large area, a large amount of Joss flames would be consumed every second. Thinking of the stingy demon ancestors in the endless sea, as well as the almighty guardians of the heavenly gate who rarely took action, this kind of expenditure of Joss flames was definitely not in line with the style of the Tianwu world's natives. Therefore, the ones who took action were either experts from other worlds or many demon ancestors working together to block this area. Most of the experts from other worlds did not dare to make a move at this time. Even if they really did exist, they would have ulterior motives. For example, he had not seen Hamba, Hong Yun, and the others for a long time. At this moment, they were probably waiting for the world to be repaired so that they could snatch the treasure. Inside, there was the incarnation of Tongtian. Outside, there was ancestor Yang Mei. At this moment, although the Tianwu world did not seem to have changed, a storm was brewing in the dark. Even those natives who had touched the false god realm would die if they were not careful. Then, here came the interesting part. Since there were many demon ancestors in the Hengduan mountain range, and even the guardians of the heavenly gate were afraid of them, why did these demon ancestors not take action when the sky demon, the undying, and the inferno demon beasts were causing trouble? The desolate demons in the Hengduan mountain range had joined forces with the inferno demon beasts and the undying to severely injure the beast master Kirin and make him flee. These demon ancestors did not stand up for the beast master Kirin, which meant that they had tacitly approved of this matter. However, since they stood against the beast master Kirin, they could only watch as the beast master escaped from the Hengduan mountain range. In other words, the fact that the heavily injured beast master Kirin was able to escape from the Hengduan mountain range was probably due to the demon ancestors' help or tacitly approval. In any case, if Lin Yuan had given up on the beast master Kirin and chose the other side, he would definitely not have allowed the beast master Kirin to leave the Hengduan mountain range alive. If these demon ancestors took action, no matter how heaven-defying the beast master Kirin's methods were, what could he do? Including now, Lin Yuan led the northern frontier army into the Hengduan mountain range and went straight to the Monster King court. These demon ancestors did not stand up either. They only joined forces to block the possibility of this place being sensed by others. However, they did not have the slightest intention of being biased. None of them stood up to support Lin Yuan in his bid to become the Beast Master, nor did they stand up to directly ask Lin Yuan to leave. It was too strange, or rather, it was too contradictory. The secret of the Hengduan mountain range seemed to be right in front of him. If not for this huge gamble that involved almost all of Lin Yuan's assets, he would have definitely tested the waters of the Hengduan mountain range. Suddenly, Lin Yuan's movements paused, and a glint flashed across his eyes. He felt as if his soul was blessed. These demon ancestors in the Hengduan mountain range did not seem to care about who was the Beast Master. Or rather, they did not care about the reason for these battles. They only did the right thing at the right time and maintained absolute neutrality. This was just like a preset program. System, use the power of incense. I want to look up all the information about the Hengduan mountain range. I want as much as you can. When Lin Yuan's voice fell, more than 50,000 points of incense were deducted from the interface. Correspondingly, a huge flow of information suddenly surged into Lin Yuan's sea of consciousness. Even though his sea of consciousness was incomparably tough, he could not help but feel waves of headache. After all, although the system was like a Russian doll, the things exchanged with real money were most likely not a scam. From the beginning of the Hengduan mountain range's habitat until now, everything that happened appeared in Lin Yuan's mind. He did not even need to flip through the information. He only needed to think, and he could outline a large amount of related information. It was as if he was the one who experienced all of this personally. Chapter 1066. Of course, although the system was powerful, it was not omnipotent. The information that it fed back to Lin Yuan was basically the content that appeared in official history, unofficial history, or gossip. It did not matter if the information was buried in the river of history. As long as it did appear, it would be found by the system. After filtering through the data, it would eliminate the obviously fabricated information and send the information that was more than 60% authentic to Lin Yuan. As for the things that were not recorded, it could not be said that the system could not find them, but it was certain that with the system's current power, if it directly flipped through the river of time to see what happened in the Hengduan mountain range in the past, no matter if it was the system or Lin Yuan, they would have to pay an unbearable price. Interesting, after connecting several things together, the doubt in Lin Yuan's eyes eased slightly. As expected, there was no lack of talented people in this world. However, aptitude, shrewdness, and methods could only change a small situation. When faced with the real wheel of history, the influence that a person or a group of people could exert was so weak that it was laughable. Just like the Great Qin that swept the world, it was not because of Ing Zheng, the Great Qin Emperor. Instead, it was because before Ing Zheng, the Great Qin Empire had 6 generations of wise emperors. They turned the Qin clan, which was not much better than the barbarians, into the Qin Empire. It was also because of the accumulation of power from generation to generation that Ing Zheng was able to conquer the 6 nations. If it were not for the accumulation of the wise emperors of the Great Qin Empire, no matter how powerful Ing Zheng was, he would not be able to summon troops and provisions out of nothing to conquer the 6 nations. Similarly, the situation in the Hengduan mountain range was actually the same. The Hengduan mountain range occupied the center of the Tianwu continent. All the monsters that lived here in the past were used by the 7 great empires as a great wall of flesh and blood to stop the invasion of the enemy countries. They were the target of the nobles to prove their bravery, and were the means used by the demon slayers, mercenaries, and wanderers to make a living. It was obvious that their status was low. However, when the Beast Lord Kirin was fighting, the Hengduan mountain range was not. Back then, none of the 7 empires dared to provoke the Beast Lord Kirin. Otherwise, they would face a disaster in the blink of an eye. Later on, the 7 empires worked together and barely managed to suppress the Hengduan mountain range. It was also because of the alliance of the 7 empires that the ambitious Beast Lord Kirin had no choice but to indulge himself in pleasure. He no longer acted like a ruthless hero. However, the Beast Lord Kirin's disguise did not cause the 7 empires to let down their guard. Instead, it allowed the various clans in the Hengduan mountain range to take advantage of the situation and slowly take over the Monster King court. So it's like this. Reading up to this point, Lin Yuan could not help but murmur. Actually, he had always been curious. When the Beast Lord Kirin was young, he was definitely considered a ruthless hero. After all, he was able to lead the Hengduan mountain range, which was not strong at that time, to suppress the 7 great empires. Even Lei Qiusheng, a ruthless person who usurped the country, had no choice but to compromise and let go of the Jiao clan's remnants. Perhaps only Lei Qiusheng himself knew how much trouble it would bring him if he did not kill them all. However, the Beast Lord Kirin was basically mediocre in his later years. He was always in seclusion in the Monster King court, and even came up with the title of the strongest in the desolate monster realm. However, in reality, he did not break through. On the outside, there were the 7 great empires suppressing him. On the inside, there were the various clans that were expanding day by day. With such a situation, no wonder you would not care about it. No wonder you would set up such a trap. The confusion in Lin Yuan's eyes disappeared, leaving behind only relief. The Beast Lord Kirin actually thought highly of Lin Yuan as the next Beast Lord because he saw some special qualities in Lin Yuan. He believed that the Monster King court would become stronger day by day under Lin Yuan's leadership. Although he might not be able to take back the authority of the Sky Martial World, he definitely would not be like now, where he would be kept in the Hungduan mountain range as a meat wall and prey. However, there were still some Monster King clans who were happy and content with their current lives. This time, in the election for the new Beast Lord, most of the Monster Kings did not want to be the Beast Lord themselves. It was just that they did not want Lin Yuan to take over the position. They had to admit that Lin Yuan was a very ambitious and capable existence. He would definitely be able to lead the Monster King court to greater glory. But the problem was that the 7 great empires had joined hands because of the pressure brought by the Beast Lord Kirin. If the even more terrifying Black Jiao took over the position of Beast Lord, it would only cause a war to break out. Even if the Hungduan mountain range could win, most of the Monster Kings would not be able to live to see that day. So, this world Lin Yuan sighed. Even the false divinity realm cultivators and Monster Kings stopped here. They were unwilling to take half a step out of the safe sky martial world. They did not think that this world would be able to repair itself. At that time, they would lose everything they cared about. From the mortals to the low-level cultivators and Monster Kings, although there was a large amount of war on the surface, other than Lin Yuan, all of them were just trying to deplete each other's population. Not to mention the extermination of a country or clan, even the ownership of a border region was a matter of negotiation. Compared to war, it was more like a formality. This world was indeed very deformed. A person who did not seek to improve himself would at most cripple himself. But a group of people who had reached the peak would no longer seek to improve themselves. They would even drag the whole world down with them and let everything become a foregone conclusion. This would create such a deformed world. After understanding the mentality of the Monster Kings in the Hungduan mountain range, Lin Yuan took a deep breath and looked at the endless mountain range in front of him. For a moment, his feelings were somewhat complicated. If the information given by the system was really reliable, then Lin Yuan had made a mistake from the beginning. In the Hungduan mountain range, there was really only the strongest in the desolate demon realm. There was no existence that had stepped into the false divinity realm. There might not even be a demigod. The reason why the Heavenly Gate Guardians were afraid of this place was because countless years ago, many powerful Monster Kings were unwilling to see the Monster Kings being forced by humans to the point where they were deprived of even the last bit of land to survive. So, they gave up on reincarnation and buried their flesh and bones in a special way in this mountain range. After that, they formed an almost unbreakable formation. Only Monster Kings with the corresponding bloodline, who held the artifacts left behind by their ancestors, could activate this formation that enveloped the entire Hungduan mountain range. They could summon the spirits of their ancestors to eliminate all external enemies for the Hungduan mountain range. Now, the artifacts that activated the formation had long been destroyed, but the formation had given birth to its own intelligence. According to the thoughts of the Monster Kings who set up the formation, it had become the guardian of the Hungduan mountain range. Therefore, there was not a single false divinity in the Hungduan mountain range, but it could be said that there were countless false divinities. Chapter 1067. After all, other than the bloody law of the jungle, the demonic beasts mainly paid attention to the clan's glory and bloodline inheritance. These demonic beast clans living in the Hungduan mountains piously prayed for the protection of their ancestors every day, hoping that they or their descendants would not disgrace the glory left behind by their ancestors. Such emotions, in Lin Yuan's view, were simply a huge mine of incense power. And under such a huge amount of incense power, how much incense power had the formation spirit stored? It had probably reached a number that Lin Yuan did not even dare to think about. That was to say, this formation spirit had not been completed yet. Otherwise, this formation spirit would immediately be able to manifest its own body and become a saint-like existence. Therefore, the formation spirit was not an absolutely neutral existence. Its neutrality was only directed at the demonic beasts. After all, obsession was a very terrifying existence. Unless one achieved the freedom of the primordial chaos Daluo, even a sage of the Great Path would receive the impression of obsession. The formation spirit's obsession was to protect the reproduction of the demonic beasts in the Hungduan mountains. This was the original intention of the formation, and now it was related to its own interests. All troops stopped. Lin Yuan, who was covered in cold sweat, suddenly issued an order in the command channel. Even if the formation spirit was at the level of a fake god, or even a being that could surpass a fake god and become a sage of the Great Path at any time, its spiritual wisdom was still not much. After all, other than being born stupid, what could really determine a person's wisdom was not IQ itself, but various life experiences. Therefore, demonic beasts in the wisdom state had the same wisdom as humans, but each had its own personality. The wisdom of a spirit array was not inferior to that of a human, but the most fatal part was that it did not have much experience in the world. It did not understand most of the things in the world, and when it encountered something it did not understand, it would choose the simplest way to solve it. As usual, Lin Yuan entering the Hengduan Mountains could be interpreted in many ways. Intelligent creatures often only saw what they wanted to see. For example, the various dynasties were looking forward to the northern frontier falling out with the Hengduan Mountains. It was not that they wanted to rope in Lin Yuan, but that they did not want the northern frontier to continue to grow. However, the clans in the Hengduan Mountains felt that Lin Yuan had ordered the troops to enter the Hengduan Mountains at this time, not to fall out with them, but to compete for the position of the Beast Master. Then, in the eyes of the formation spirit, what did Lin Yuan and the Northern Frontier Army's behavior at this moment look like? Lin Yuan could not figure this out, so he could only keep silent. This was because when the formation spirit did not understand Lin Yuan's thoughts, it would easily treat Lin Yuan and the Northern Frontier Army as foreign invaders. Naturally, it would stand on the side of the monsters in the Hengduan Mountains. In the face of a pseudo-god with almost endless incense power, Lin Yuan said that he really couldn't bear it. Even if he was a cheater, he had to pay attention to the basic law. In the case that the incense power reserve was far less than the array spirit, how could he bare his teeth in front of it? Lin Yuan was very clear that there was no reason to talk to the program. It was like when you downloaded some files on your computer, the antivirus software installed on your computer would immediately determine that it was a virus and completely delete it without even asking. What could you do then? Could you not only forgive it with a smile? There were two ways to solve this problem. The first was to directly shut down the antivirus software to download and run it. The second was to find a way to install a protective layer on the files that were determined to be viruses so that the antivirus software would not be able to determine that it was a virus. The same principle applied to Lin Yuan. He had no way to directly shut down the formation, nor could he block the formation spirit's perception of the outside world. Therefore, he could only stop the act of attacking the Monster King's court by force and temporarily let the formation spirit's judgment of his own judgment. At the very least, he had to first prove that he was not a virus file, right? When Lin Yuan's actions fell into the eyes of the leaders of the clans near the Monster King's court, it was a completely different scene. The Northern Frontier Army, which had been unstoppable all the way, had killed countless monsters. Just as they were about to reach the Monster King's court and start a decisive battle with them, they suddenly stopped. They did not move forward, nor did they set up camp. It looked as if they were waiting for orders. But there was no sign. The flying monsters they sent out did not see the structure of the command system of the Northern Frontier Army at all. They only saw the huge army suddenly stop. From the commander Li Zhongxing to the most ordinary soldiers. Even if the messenger ran fast, it was impossible to silently let the entire army know of an order in an instant, right? Strange. Too strange. This army was completely illogical. Half an hour later, in the night, a red horse broke through the darkness. The rider on the horse did not hold any weapons, as if the huge monster tide in front of him was nothing. In the blink of an eye, he rushed into the monster tide, which was formed by monsters at least in the late stage of the wisdom realm. The rider cleared his throat and said loudly, "Who is in charge of the Hengduan mountain range now?" "My Dragon King invites you to come." His loud and clear voice echoed in the night. The leaders of the clans looked at each other and did not know how to respond. After all, The Black Jiao did not care about the various defense lines of the northern frontier and led so many people into the Hengduan mountain range. It did not seem like he wanted to have a good talk with them. In addition, the Black Jiao's record of killing 2 monster kings was too terrifying. For a group of monsters of the desolate monster realm, going out to face Lin Yuan directly was no different than gambling with their lives. Once Lin Yuan had evil thoughts, they would die in an instant. Everyone came out to fight for the position of Monster King, but until now, there was no definite result. Every clan had their own experts. Their words carried weight in their own land. But in the Monster King court, where the big shots gathered, no Monster King dared to say that he could be the master of the Hengduan mountain range at this time, unless it was the Monster King Kirin or the 3 Monster Kings in the past. But not to talk. Although the beast tide under the Monster Beast King court was strong, it was the military strength of the various clans. Every beast could be said to be the mainstay of the various clans. There were even some small and medium-sized clans who were the clan leaders and the like. They gathered here to wait for the arrival of the war because they had no other choice. But now, the Black Jiao wanted to talk with their leaders before the war. God knows how many monster beasts sighed in relief and hoped that this matter could be resolved peacefully. If they refused, the Black Jiao would not even need to make a move. The monster beasts under their command would tear them apart alive. Our Dragon King said that he will only give you 3 breaths of time. After 3 breaths, if you are not willing to talk outside, then we will attack directly. The Red Horse Rider stood among the countless monster beasts and said arrogantly, "After all, the position of Monster King belongs to our Dragon King." Chapter 1068. On the other side, Lin Yuan coiled up his flood dragon body and stood in front of the northern frontier army. His eyes were cold and gloomy. It was hard to say what the attitude of the clans in the Hengduan mountain range was, but what was certain was that the Monster Beast Palace was indeed in a state of disunity. If it wasn't for the pressure brought by the northern frontier army, they probably wouldn't have joined hands at all. With the previous battle record of killing the 2 monster kings, and the first impression of a massacre as soon as they entered the Hengduan mountain range, those clans probably wouldn't easily come out to communicate with Lin Yuan, not to mention that Lin Yuan had given them 3 breaths of time. Therefore, these clan leaders didn't have the opportunity to cut off their interests and fight with force. They had to choose a suitable clan leader to communicate with Lin Yuan in the shortest time possible. And this unlucky guy who was pushed out would undoubtedly be the weakest, the most miserable, and the least popular one. Then the question was, who was more suitable than this unlucky guy to be the Monster King? The game of psychological warfare had always been like this. Every gamer would constantly look for advantages in words and actions to make the situation go in a direction that was beneficial to them. Lin Yuan didn't have the slightest intention of playing a game with the Hengduan mountain range monster beast clans. He directly expressed his attitude through some psychological hints. It was as if he was choking the necks of these clan leaders, forcing them to push out this unlucky guy. The 3 breaths of time hadn't passed, only 2 breaths of time. A white wolf the size of a calf walked out with the young general sent out by Li Zhongxing. The wolf's face was full of helplessness. It followed behind the young general step by step, as if it was afraid that it would be killed by Lin Yuan halfway. It was obviously very reasonable for it to have this kind of concern. After all, killing the commander of the other side in front of the 2 armies was indeed a very demoralizing act. For Lin Yuan, who paid attention to results and was unscrupulous, this was a very reasonable behavior. "You are?" Lin Yuan stared at the white wolf in front of him and asked indifferently. The white wolf paused, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and said in a deep voice, "I'm the clan leader of the Silver Moon clan. You can call me Yinlei. In front of a great monster like you, I don't deserve to be called you." Silver Moon clan? Lin Yuan pondered for a moment. This clan wasn't a nameless clan, but in the Hengduan mountain range, the Silver Moon clan situation wasn't good. Including Yinlei, the Silver Moon clan has a total of 4 desolate monster realm cultivators. It can be regarded as a standard mid-sized clan in the upper reaches. Lin Yuan has also heard of Yinlei himself. He is a capable general under the command of Lei Meng, the Honed Ice Wolf King. He has a fierce reputation for fighting against the armies of human dynasties more than once. He has killed millions of people, and countless monsters have died in his hands. But the problem was that Lei wasn't a clan leader who had a say in the depths of the Hungduan mountain range. His clan was a branch of the Hone Ice Wolf clan. Even if they had 4 members of the desolate demon realm, the Silver Moon clan could only be assigned to the periphery of the Hungduan mountain range to protect the royal court. This was the unspoken rule of the Hungduan mountain range. Only the true descendants were qualified to live in the Hungduan mountain range, or they could simply leave the clan and enter the Hungduan mountain range alone. The Silver Moon clan situation wasn't good recently. It was mainly because the 3 Beast Kings and Kirin were the losers in the previous incident. As Lei Ming's right-hand man, it would be strange if Lei had a good time in the Hungduan mountain range. If it wasn't for the Silver Moon clan's rich experience in fighting against human armies and the fact that they weren't in the depths of the Hungduan mountain range, they would have been wiped out by the other clans that participated in the killing of Kirin. The only exception to Lin Yuan was that Lei would appear in the group that resisted him. After all, he was on the same side as Kirin and the 3 Beast Kings. After that incident, even if the remnants of the royal court didn't go to the Stenetlan forest, they definitely wouldn't appear here now. Such an action was no different from a traitor. Seeing Lin Yuan's strange gaze, Lei licked his sweaty nose and said in a low voice, "I know you feel that I betrayed the Wolf King, but I have no choice. I'm different from the other clans. When that incident happened, my clansmen and I were still fighting against the humans on the Frost Mirror grassland. We didn't have the chance to retreat to the Stenetlan forest or other places. Also, when I returned to the clan, all the females and cubs in the clan had been captured by them. As he spoke, Lei's gaze was filled with hatred and resentment. After all, as a member of the Hungduan Mountains, it had never retreated in the face of the armies of the human dynasties countless times. However, after a battle, it had inexplicably become a criminal of the Hungduan Mountains. All the females and cubs in the clan had been taken away. The brother clans that it trusted had either been wiped out or evacuated. The brothers around it were either dead or injured. There was no way for them to resist at all. They even had to work for these monster clans that had persecuted its own people. It would be strange if he didn't have any resentment. This king is not interested in your story. No matter what the reason is a traitor, and this king hates traitors the most. However, this king can see that the resentment and hatred in your eyes are not fake. Then I'll say it directly. I will help you ascend to the position of Beast Master, and I will also help you save the cubs of your clan. As long as you do as I say, I can guarantee that the clans you hate will pay 10 times, 100 times the price. However, in return, all the traitors will die, including you. Lin Yuan stared at Lei and said in a low voice, "However, this king can guarantee that your Silver Moon clan can continue to reproduce for Raymond's sake. In the future, you will only become stronger. How about it? Death wasn't the end of everything for a desolate demon realm expert. Just like the Fire Kirin, even if it had been dead for hundreds of years, it could still revive itself through a series of methods. As for the other desolate demon realm experts, as long as they could pay the corresponding price, they could naturally reverse life and death." Lei nodded heavily without any hesitation and said in a low voice, "Dragon King, please give your orders. This subordinate is willing to serve Lord Dragon King." As he blurted out, he realized that he didn't have the qualifications to become Black Jiao's subordinate. However, it didn't matter. As long as he could ensure the reproduction of his clan and take revenge on those disgusting fellows, it was fine. Since he had already reached this stage, what else could he not bet on? Chapter 1069. After nearly an hour, Lei finally walked out of the Northern Frontier Army's encampment. During this 2-hour confrontation, the Northern Frontier Army was like a statue. Even though they were wearing heavy armor, they didn't sway in the slightest. Their eyes were fixed on the beast tide in front of them. Obviously, as long as Lin Yuan gave the order, these Northern Frontier Army would directly rush out and kill. On the contrary, The beasts of the Hungduan mountain range were much more disorganized and undisciplined. At the beginning of the confrontation, they were still able to maintain an aggressive appearance. However, as time went on, these beasts couldn't hold it in anymore. Not only did they rest in groups of 2 or 3, but they also whispered to each other and discussed the Northern Frontier Army's attack on the Hungduan mountain range. Even the monstrous beasts of the Stoneclaw Forest seemed to be more elite than these so-called great monstrous beasts. When he returned to the encampment of the Hungduan mountain range beasts, Lei was obviously not as frightened as he was when he first came. Instead, a group of great beasts stood at the top of the encampment, looking at Lei, who was running towards the encampment with a nervous expression. The Northern Frontier Army was really too strong. Coupled with the importance of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce to the Hungduan mountain range, there really weren't many beasts who were willing to completely fall out with Lin Yuan if it wasn't necessary. Of course, the prerequisite was that Lin Yuan was willing to give up the position of Beast Master. Otherwise, there was no need to talk about any other conditions. When Lei stepped into the encampment of the beasts, a group of great beasts surrounded him and clamored. The joys and sorrows of demonic beasts were not the same. Lei only felt that they were noisy. After a while, Lei cleared his throat and gestured for the other demonic beasts to quieten down. He then said, "The Black Jiao told me that he is not interested in the position of the Beast Master in the Hungduan Mountains. However, the Northern Frontier has been suffering heavy casualties in the Hungduan Mountains. This time, he came here with the intention of denouncing us. However, when we approached the Stoneclaw Forest, the Northern Frontier troops were attacked by the Yun Nation's tiger soldiers. After that, many of the beast hides were attacked by the goo poison. Hence, the Black Jiao came here mainly to question us if we intend to join forces with the Yun Nation's empire and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness to deal with the Northern Frontier." As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding beast kings looked at each other. During this period of time, they did not care about the matters in the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains. After all the clans were busy fighting for the position of Beast Master. Who had the time to care about how many people came to the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains and how many people died? Anyway, as long as the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was still operating as usual, it was good news for the demonic beasts in the Hungduan Mountains. However, who would have thought that the men deployed by the Northern Frontier in the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains had been secretly targeted by the Yun Nation's empire and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness? Who would have thought that if the Black Jiao did not come here personally, he would not have discovered that the Yun Nation's empire and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness had joined forces? Then, this blame would have been placed on their heads. Injustice. Too much injustice. The Beast Kings in the Hungduan Mountains could guarantee that they did not participate in any operations against the Northern Frontier. However, they had to bear the blame. The worst thing was that they could not defend themselves now. How were they going to explain to the Black Jiao? Were they going to say that they were busy electing the new Beast Master and did not pay attention to the matters in the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains? Even if they were shameless enough to say that, the Black Jiao might not believe them. There were so many Beast Kings in the Hungduan Mountains. Even if 1 or 2 of them did not have the time to pay attention to the periphery, could it be that all the spies of the clans had died? So many lives in the Northern Frontier were lost in the periphery of the Hungduan Mountains, and they did not even report it? For a moment, these Beast Kings were all deep in thought. Some of them looked at the Beast Kings around them, as if they were thinking about whether these Beast Kings could have really joined forces with the Yun Nation's empire and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness. After all, even if it was not to deal with the Northern Frontier, but to fight for the position of Beast Master, it was better to have external help than to face it alone. They borrowed the power of the Yun Nation's empire and the demon venerable of the southern wilderness to increase their prestige. Then, on the other hand, did the other 2 parties also borrow their influence in the Hungduan Mountains to block some news from reaching the king's palace? Other than these demonic beasts who were scheming, the other demonic beasts were the more hot-tempered type. Their first reaction was to grab their weapons and directly head towards the southern wilderness and the Yun Nation's empire. After all, they had not done this before. However, now that the Black Jiao had come to take revenge, they would be the ones to suffer the consequences. After this war, although the final battle in the Monster Palace had not started, the losses were shared among the various clans. On average, 1 to 3 branches of each clan would be wiped out by the northern frontier. Beast Kings, calm down, calm down. Inlay stuck out his tongue and licked his nose. His eyes were a little gloomy as he continued, I have already talked to the Black Jiao. During this period of time, we have indeed neglected the movements in the periphery of the Hengduan Mountains. This is our fault, but we have not done anything. However, the Black Jiao's attitude is very clear now. Either we continue to fight, or we send troops to attack the Frost Mirror grassland. As soon as he finished speaking, the Beast Kings around him fell silent. What kind of plan was this? The Yun Nation's empire and the demon Venerable of the southern wilderness joined forces to deal with the northern frontier and even put the blame on the Hengduan Mountains. In the end, after the Black Jiao took revenge on the Hengduan Mountains, he did not go after the Yun Nation and the demon Venerable of the southern wilderness. He did not intend to let the Hengduan Mountains take revenge either. Instead, he pointed his gun at the Shuangjian dynasty. Did the Frost Mirror people eat your rice? What does this have to do with the Shuangjian dynasty? The Black Jiao said that although the Hengduan Mountains is powerful, other than the northern frontier, there are still 6 other empires outside. Especially after the recent series of events, the higher-ups of the northern frontier have raised a lot of doubts about whether they still want to maintain a friendly relationship with the Hengduan Mountains. Therefore, we have to express our stance on this matter. We have to use our identity as the northern frontier's ally to do something for the northern frontier. Otherwise, even with the Black Jiao's existence, the northern frontier might not continue to maintain a relationship with us. Putting aside the fact that the northern frontier has joined forces with the other 6 empires to continue blocking the Hengduan Mountains, just canceling the deal between us and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce isn't something that the Beast Kings can handle, right? However, the Yun Nation is one of the 6 empires after all. The Black Jiao only realized that we might not be the culprit after being ambushed by them in the Hengduan Mountains. However, there's no actual evidence. If we attack the Yun Nation, the other 5 empires will definitely join forces with us. Chapter 1070. Thus, Black Jiao's intention is for us to attack the 6 empires in the name of launching a monster attack and focus on the barbarians in the Frost Mirror grassland. After all, their main forces are now at the northern frontier. If we attack the Frost Mirror grassland now, we can easily kill a large number of Shuangjian barbarian and force the Frost Mirror grassland to reinforce them. When that happens, the pressure on the northern frontier army will be greatly reduced, and they will naturally be free to deal with the Chuyan Empire and the Southern Wasteland Demon Venerable. This is also something that we can do from the perspective of an ally. After all, there are monster attacks every year. Isn't it up to us to decide when they will happen? Even if the Heavenly Gates Guardians want to investigate this matter, it will be very difficult for them to find trouble with us as long as they don't fall out with us. Inlay's mouth gradually widened as he said in a clear voice, This is Black Jiao's intention. I also agree. It depends on what the Beast Kings think. What would they think? Of course, they agreed. The Beast Kings in the Hengduan Mountains were not willing to fall out with Black Jiao. They did not allow Black Jiao to succeed as the Beast King because they were worried that the northern frontier would become even more powerful and attract the joint attack of the 6 empires. Now, they did not fight with the northern frontier and could even curry favor with the northern frontier from the perspective of an ally. Furthermore, they did not have to bear any responsibility. Why would they not do such a good thing? Furthermore, how many monsters died in the periphery of the Hengduan Mountains? What did it have to do with them? On the contrary, if they fought with Black Jiao in front of the Monster King Palace today, the Beast Kings from large clans might not suffer any losses, but most of the great monsters under them would die. After all, the Northern Frontier Army's crazy fighting style was obvious to all. They were simply a bunch of lunatics. Who had ever seen a regular human army fight with monsters? Kicking and hitting them? Even when they lost their weapons, they directly used their mouths to bite them. Weren't they more monsters than monsters? If that's the case, We have no objections. A shriveled and aged beast king raised his head and said in a trembling voice, "But little cub, are you sure that Black Jiao is telling the truth? That it's only here because of the deaths in the Hengduan Mountains of the northern frontier, and that it's not interested in the position of beast king at all?" Lei pondered for a moment, and then said thoughtfully, "I think it's believable. That Black Jiao is an outsider after all, and Kirin was already severely injured when he escaped. I'm afraid he hasn't woken up yet. Otherwise, he would have definitely entered the Hengduan mountain range with the Black Jiao. Therefore, there's an 80% chance that the Black Jiao doesn't know what the position of Beastmaster entails." At this point, he paused and added, "Even if the Black Jiao is interested in the position of Beast King, it's probably too busy right now, right? The Sky Demon is still in the Central Plains and the South, and the Xuanjian dynasty is attacking the northern frontier. The Qian dynasty and the Demon Venerable of the southern wilderness are obviously hostile to the Black Jiao. If it starts a war with us now, isn't it seeking its own death? The current northern frontier only occupied 1/3 of the Xinwu dynasty's territory, and its total population was less than 1/3 of the Xinwu dynasty's. When the Xinwu dynasty faced the Xuanjian dynasty, the Qingjiang dynasty, the Endless Sea, and the Hengduan Mountains, they were beaten back repeatedly. Although they no longer had the Endless Sea cucumber, they had the Sky Demon, the Qian dynasty, and the Demon Venerable of the southern wilderness. It could be said that once the northern frontier fell out with the Hengduan Mountains, it would not take long for it to completely collapse. No one would doubt that the northern frontier would dare to fall out with the Hengduan Mountains at this time, especially the Beast Kings. After all, this was a common problem among intelligent creatures. Even if they knew that sometimes what they saw might not be the truth, they were still willing to believe what they saw. Since no one objects, it means this matter is feasible. Lei looked around at the Beast Kings and said in a deep voice, "The matter of attacking the Frost Mirror grassland is settled. Our Silver Moon clan has fought with the Xuanjian dynasty more than once, so I can take the lead in this matter. However, I have to remind everyone that the Black Jiao will definitely not let this matter go easily. Everyone must show their attitude, otherwise," he did not finish his sentence, but all the Beast Kings knew that the Black Jiao was never a person who was willing to suffer losses. The Hengduan Mountains followed closely behind the Black Jiao. At this point, it was obviously impossible to make the Black Jiao leave just by talking, other than the Beast Kings who were discussing animatedly. In the center of the northern frontier's military formation, Li Zhongxing and the other mid-level and high-level descended demons were standing beside Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's blue-white eyes flashed coldly. He murmured, "I've been thinking about why a Beast King position with no deterrence would attract so many Beast clans to fight for it. Previously, I thought they wanted a name to conquer other Beast clans. Later, I thought they simply did not want me to be the Beast King. I did not expect the truth to be like this." Previously, Lei had told him that the Hengduan Mountains had its own soul. Once he became the new Beast Master of the Hengduan Mountains, he would be able to communicate with the soul of the mountain range. When necessary, he could even move mountains and fill seas, changing the terrain of the Hengduan Mountains as he wished. From Lin Yuan's point of view, the Hengduan Mountains naturally did not have a spirit. This also meant that the mountain spirit that Lei mentioned was most likely the array spirit of the Great Formation. After becoming the Beast King of the Hengduan Mountains, he could communicate with the array spirit and even mobilize part of the power of the Great Formation. This Beast King position did not seem to be just for show. It was no wonder that the Beast King Kirin could fight with Su Yin, Lei Fan, and the others with the cultivation of the desolate demon realm. He could even withstand the pressure from the Inferno demon beasts. If it was not for the Beast Kings of the Hengduan Mountains stabbing him in the back, it would be hard to say who would win. If that was the case, he could not hand over the Beast King position so easily. No one could estimate how much incense power the array spirit had accumulated. Other than the Beast King Kirin, no one else knew how much power the Beast King could mobilize from the array spirit. Could Lei really be trusted? Lin Yuan's eyes flashed coldly. He said indifferently in the command system, Contact the members of the Association of the Demon Emperor immediately. Mobilize all our spies scattered in the Hungduan Mountains. I want to know where the cubs and females of the Silver Moon clan have been captured in the shortest time possible. Even among the demon beasts from the northern frontier, other than Badu, how many of them were truly trustworthy? Lei, who had turned to the enemy, was obviously not worthy of Lin Yuan's full trust. Therefore, it was necessary to take some precautions. Chapter 1071. The Black Jiao led the northern frontier's army into the Hungduan mountain range. Not long after, a strange energy enveloped the area from the Stoneclaw Forest to the Monster King Court. No one knew what happened in the Hungduan mountain range. After all, other than the experts who had touched the false god realm, ordinary people did not even have the qualifications to explore the Hungduan mountain range. Those false gods needed to rely on the power of incense to prolong their lives, so they would not waste it in such a place. Estimating the time, the northern frontier's army should have almost reached the Monster King Court. The energy that enveloped the Hungduan mountain range suddenly dissipated. All the experts looked over curiously, but when they took a closer look, many of their faces turned green. There were no corpses everywhere, and there was not even a single injured person. The Hungduan mountain range's monsters were only confronting the northern frontier. The northern frontier's army was also not as arrogant as they were at the beginning. They even began to slowly retreat. It was obvious that the conflict between the northern frontier and the Hungduan mountain range had not developed to the point of life and death. Either the Black Jiao or the Hungduan mountain range had proposed a reconciliation. Furthermore, both sides had reached an agreement under some unknown conditions. However, no matter what the Hungduan mountain range agreed to the northern frontier's conditions, it was not good news for the six great empires or the southern wasteland's monster kings. The northern frontier did not lose too many people in the Hungduan mountain range. Especially after the demi-human tribes and the armed monsters were mixed in, the northern frontier's military strength could be said to have decreased instead of increased. If it were not for the fact that the empires had been passed down for countless years and had many families, sects, and other private armies, the northern frontier's military strength would probably be the strongest country in the Tianwu continent. But even so, it was clear who was stronger between the hundreds of thousands of elite troops that obeyed the orders of a single person and the tens of millions of troops that had a large number of voices in the command system. Now that the northern frontier had not suffered any heavy losses, what they had to do next was to attack the surrounding regions. It would have been fine if both sides had been at peace. No matter how strong the northern frontier was, they could not afford to offend the masses and attack the various dynasties. As such, they could only attack Sky Demon. However, the problem was that the northern frontier wasn't completely free from the six empires. Putting aside the fact that the Chuyun dynasty and the demon venerable of the southern wasteland were conspiring to encroach on the Hungduan mountain, the Xuanjin dynasty had deployed almost all of its available troops to attack the northern frontier. Since the northern frontier had already been decided to become the seventh dynasty, who would dare to send troops to attack the northern frontier when the Xuanjin dynasty was the first to stir up trouble? Even if they could come up with some excuses, who would dare to say that they could definitely defeat the army of the northern frontier? In fact, although the Xuanjin dynasty felt it, they were not particularly afraid. After all, the grasslands were their home ground. Even if the army of the northern frontier was incomparably valiant and did not lose to the demon beasts in field battles, the Xuanjin dynasty still dared to say that they could fight against the northern frontier in terms of mobility and tolerance to the grasslands environment. Even if they died, they could still bite off a piece of meat from the northern frontier. What they were truly afraid of was the Chuyun dynasty. The outside world had always thought that the Chuyun dynasty and the southern wasteland's demon beasts were enemies. Even their trump card army, the Chuyun tiger soldiers, was completely used to resist the southern wasteland's demon beasts. However, in the dark, the two deadly things, the Chuyun dynasty, had long been corrupted by the Chuyun dynasty. Even the previous emperor was addicted to the Chuyun dynasty and could not extricate himself from the Chuyun dynasty. This attempt to encroach on the Hungduan Mountains was not because of the Chuyan dynasty's ambition, but because of the southern wasteland's demon Venerable's order. Originally, the dynasty was already in a difficult situation. Black Zhao's divine thunder almost wiped out the emperor and all the civil and military officials in the dynasty. In addition, the southern wasteland's demon beasts suddenly rebelled, which also caught the Chuyan dynasty unprepared. Losing the city and land was one thing, but the key was that the Chuyan dynasty's army that could fight almost all died in this incident. Moreover, although the Chuyan dynasty was located in the Great Swamp, the official system was very complete. There was a series of complete imperial examinations that recruited talents from aristocratic families and poor families. After these people passed the imperial examinations, they were not immediately appointed. Instead, according to their results, they were assigned to counties with different levels of wealth to assist them. Then, they would be promoted based on their personal achievements. Those outstanding talents could directly continue their studies in the imperial library built in the imperial city. At the same time, they could build up their qualifications and be prepared to fill the high positions in the imperial court. Therefore, Lin Yuan's divine thunder not only wiped out all the civil and military officials in the Chuyan dynasty, but even the reserve talents of the Chuyan dynasty were killed. Now, it was very difficult for the Chuyan dynasty to even maintain the livelihood of the people, let alone wage war. If the northern frontier attacked the Chuyan dynasty, they would probably be annihilated overnight. The new monarch of the Chuyan dynasty was not the direct descendant of the previous monarch. Instead, he was the son of a prince. After going through a series of procedures, he was adopted by the previous emperor to inherit the throne. After all, those outstanding princes were all killed by Lin Yuan when they were in the imperial court. They could not expect the remaining few hedonistic sons to inherit the throne, could they? And now, this new monarch felt as if there was a huge danger word hanging above his head. The beauties in his harem did not seem to be pretty anymore. The spiritual items produced from various places did not seem to be fragrant either. After all, he felt that he was only one step away from annihilation. How could he be in the mood to enjoy the luxuries that came with the power of a monarch? In the throne room of the Chuyan dynasty, if the northern frontier attacks our dynasty will be annihilated overnight. My beloved subjects, do you have any good ideas to resolve my worries? The young monarch of the Chuyan dynasty paced back and forth in front of the dragon throne. It was as if the golden chair behind him had thorns. After all, if he continued to be a prince, even if the Chuyan dynasty was annihilated, he could continue to be a rich young master by hiding his identity. He might even be able to find a job at the northern frontier and live out the rest of his life in comfort. But now, he was the monarch. The responsibility that came with this supreme position was extremely terrifying. For example, once the Chuyan dynasty was annihilated, all the civil and military officials in the dynasty, including the royal family, could hide their identities and seek refuge at the northern frontier. However, as the monarch, he had no choice but to die for the country. An old official with white hair and beard took a step toward the aisle in the middle of the throne room. He said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty, how can there be any good ideas at this point? The plan now depends on your choice. Will you continue to be the enemy of the northern frontier or think of a way to make peace?" Make peace? Of course. The monarch of the Chuyan dynasty's expression changed. He said in a deep voice, "Old Prime Minister, please teach me what I should do to make peace with the northern frontier." Chapter 1072. 4 hours later, Li Zhong stood in the prince's residence with his hands behind his back. All of a sudden, he heard a shriek above his head. When he lifted his head, he happened to see a ferocious bird with black and white feathers circling above the prince's residence in the northern frontier. That's... Li Zhong glanced sideways as confusion flashed through his eyes. He could not sense any demonic chi from the bird at all, as if it was just an ordinary wild beast. However, the prince's residence in the northern frontier was where Lin Yuan often stayed, so the aura left there was extremely terrifying. Let alone ordinary wild beasts. Even demonic beasts below Wisdom State would avoid the prince's residence in the northern frontier. Moreover, this ferocious bird was clearly a foreign species. At the very least, he had never seen one before in the northern frontier. The cloud-piercing eagle from the Chuyun dynasty. Li Xian's voice suddenly came from behind. Without waiting for Li Zhongxing to reply, Li Xian pursed his lips and imitated the bird's cry. Then, he slowly extended his left hand. At this moment, the bird flapped its wings and swooped down, landing on Li Xian's shoulder. After the cloud-piercing condor steadied itself, Li Xian reached out and removed the bamboo tube tied to the condor's leg. He poured out a roll of parchment from the tube. After skimming through the contents of the parchment, Li Xian smirked and revealed a mocking smile. The Chuyun dynasty is planning to make peace with us. They're even willing to give up Kongyun, Dingyun, and Shangyun counties. As long as our northern frontier doesn't target the Chuyun dynasty in the upcoming military operations, they're even willing to call themselves a subordinate nation and agree to all the decisions made by the northern frontier during the Seven Dynasties' Great Ceremony unconditionally. Li Zhong's eyelids twitched a little. The Seven Dynasties' Great Ceremony could be said to be a convention that had been in place ever since the Seven Dynasties were established. After all, the Seven Dynasties had settled down, and no one could really destroy the other. Therefore, when it came to territorial ownership or large-scale military conflicts, both sides would hold it in until the Seven Dynasties' Great Ceremony that was held once every 4 years. During the last Seven Dynasties' Grand Ceremony, the Shinwu dynasty was still one of the most powerful countries. No one knew what happened during the Grand Ceremony that day. However, not long after that, the four major powers joined hands to encircle and annihilate the Shinwu dynasty. As for the northern frontier, firstly, the territory of the Shinwu dynasty had not been completely recovered. Although it was designated as the Seventh Dynasty, it had not been officially established. The monarch and the title of the dynasty had not been decided yet. Only Li Zhong, who was a prince and not a monarch, existed. Besides, the 4-year deadline was not up yet. Therefore, no one mentioned this matter. Is the Chuyun dynasty certain that we won't attack them immediately, so they want to give us benefits to shut us up? Li Zhong did not look at the parchment. He only sneered and said, "This gift is not sincere at all. They said that they ceded 3 counties to us, but in order to take over these 3 counties, we have to go through the territory that the Southern Wilderness Demon Range took from them. Moreover, these 3 counties are the most vulnerable places that the Southern Wilderness Demon Range built in the Chuyun dynasty. Are they trying to divert the trouble so that we won't have time to take care of them when we fight with the Southern Wilderness Demon Range?" Li Xian was silent for a moment. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he said, "I have a suggestion. The letter says that the envoys of the Chuyun dynasty have set off and will arrive at the northern frontier in a few days. Why don't I borrow a group of demonic beasts from Lord Dragon King and kill them in the Southern Wilderness Demon Range's territory before they arrive?" When he spoke up to here, he paused for a moment and added, "Now, the Chuyun Empire is extremely afraid of us. Once the peace talks fail, they'll definitely become alarmed. Moreover, once the diplomatic group sets off, they'll definitely bring along an official letter of credence. Once the diplomatic group is intercepted and killed, they'll definitely think that the demon vein of the southern wasteland has discovered this matter. In their panic, they might even suddenly dispatch troops and catch the demon vein of the southern wasteland off guard." Li Zhong frowned and pondered for a moment with his hands behind his back. Then he slowly said, "Okay, but we don't have to kill them. We just have to appear on their path and pretend to be patrolling. When we discover them, we just have to chase them for a while." Although the demonic beasts of the southern wilderness mainly cultivated the art of goo poison, it was impossible to distinguish the demonic beasts of the southern wilderness and the demonic beasts of the Hengduan mountain range. A group of frightened demonic beasts. There was really no need for the northern frontier to put in the effort to plan. A little scare would achieve the goal. "Okay, then I'll do it right away." Li Xian nodded slightly and turned to disappear into the darkness. On the other side, Lin Yuan retreated with the troops of the northern frontier while listening to the information from the lieutenant of the embroidered uniform guard beside him. The Demon Emperor would use many spies buried in the Hengduan mountain range. Only then did he find out that Yinlei was indeed like what he said. When the Hengduan mountain range changed, they were still fighting with the Frost Mirror Barbarian on the grassland. When they finished the battle and returned, the situation in the Hengduan mountain range was already settled. In addition, there were the females of the Silver Moon clan. All the cubs were taken away by the various clans, so they had to cooperate with the actions of the various clans. However, for the Silver Moon clan that was obviously not on the same boat, the rebels in the Hengduan mountain range would not treat them well. Almost everything was a loss, so they let the Silver Moon clan do it. The tributes they asked from the Silver Moon clan were increasing day by day. Even without Lin Yuan, Yinlei would not be able to bear the pressure sooner or later and choose to fall out with the various demonic beast clans in the Hengduan mountain range. After all, if this continued, they would be annihilated sooner or later. However, the females and cubs of the Silver Moon clan were very difficult to deal with. This was because when the various clans threatened Yinlei, they almost killed most of the females of the Silver Moon clan. As for the cubs, although they barely survived, many of them were crippled, especially the Silver Moon wolves that were about to reach adulthood. Without enough resources to support their advancement, it would be very difficult for them to awaken their spirits. Moreover, it was difficult for them to survive under the oppression of the various clans. When even having a full stomach was an extravagant hope, it was impossible for them to accumulate energy to awaken their spirits. Even if Lin Yuan wanted to rescue these Silver Moon wolves, it was actually quite difficult to do so. Just like how the position of the Beast Master in the Hengduan mountain range had not been decided, all the spoils of war were divided equally. Therefore, the cubs of the Silver Moon wolves could be said to be in almost every clan. However, each clan did not have many cubs. It was simply a fool's dream to rescue them. I hate not keeping my words. Lin Yuan's eyes were gloomy as he said in a deep voice, "If we use all the spies of the demonic Beast Emperors Association, can we save the cubs of the Silver Moon wolves to the greatest extent? I mean, those that are still worth saving." The embroidered uniform guard captain thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Although we have spies in every clan, but Chapter 1073. However, the cubs of the Silver Moon Wolf clan are too scattered. Furthermore, because we don't share a border, we haven't come into contact with the Silver Moon Wolf clan before. We don't know if those Silver Moon Wolves are worth saving or if they can never be awakened." The embroidered uniform guard captain's eyes flashed as he said in a low voice, "Furthermore, several of our subordinates have said that the most important thing right now is to persuade the clans of the Hengduan mountain range to send troops to attack the Frost Mirror grassland. If you do these things now, I'm afraid you'll be disloyal and even ruin the plan. We'll also have to face the wrath of the clans of the Hengduan mountain range." Lin Yuan stopped, his black jiao tail slowly tapping the ground. After a moment of silence, Lin Yuan said slowly, "First, I hate not keeping my word. Therefore, if I've promised something, even if it's as difficult as ascending to the heavens, I'll definitely do it, and I'll definitely do it. Second, we definitely can't count on the position of Beast Master in the Hengduan mountain range for the time being. However, this position is very important, so we can't just let anyone take it like we originally thought. However, I can think of a way to help Yinlei take the position. The prerequisite is that I have to be able to control it, so that it won't dare to betray me." The embroidered uniform guard captain was also silent for a moment before he continued. "However, the problem is that although the clans of the Hengduan mountain range often recruit demon beasts from the outside, they still value bloodlines. The spies we sent and can only pass on some information. They don't have much power. It'll be difficult to rescue so many Silver Moon Wolf cubs." At this point, he paused and suddenly changed the topic. "However, I feel that we don't have to use force. Dragon King, why don't you talk to the leaders of the clans and ask them to hand over the Silver Moon Wolf cubs to us? I feel that you're already making a huge concession by not running for the position of Beastmaster. If you only ask them to send troops to attack the Xuanjin dynasty, it'll be too easy for them. Lord Dragon King, there's a demon beast called Yin Lei waiting for you ahead. Without waiting for Lin Yuan to reply, a scout spurred his horse to Lin Yuan's side. Lin Yuan nodded slightly and signaled for the scout to lead the way. Then he turned his head to look at the embroidered uniform guard captain and said, "In short, I will definitely accomplish this task. You guys can make a list of what channels to use. If you need anything, just let me know." Then, under the guidance of the scout, Lin Yuan soon saw Yin Lei, who had separated from the Hengduan Mountains Beast Kings. "Lord Dragon King, I've already passed on the message you wanted me to send. For now, these clans are clearly leaning towards attacking the Frost Mirror grassland instead of fighting you." Yin Lei stood up straight, his eyes solemn. "Yes, well done." Lin Yuan grinned, but it only lasted for a moment before he withdrew his smile and said, "Unfortunately, your task is not easy to handle. I've already sent people to investigate, but the situation is not optimistic. During the process of being threatened by the Silver Moon clan, in addition to those who resisted and were persecuted, almost all of the Silver Moon clan's females are dead. Many of your clan's cubs are also crippled. After all, they are in the spiritual awakening stage and were kidnapped by various clans. Not to mention preparing resources for spiritual awakening, even filling their stomachs is a problem. However, if you can save them, the resources of the northern frontier can make up for it." But Lin Yuan looked like he wanted to say something, but stopped. Yin Lei's eyes were so red that they were about to burst. He looked like a ferocious beast that was about to devour a human. After all, the main reason why Yin Lei was forced to cooperate with the various clans in the Hengduan Mountains was because of the captured females and cubs. Although their combat power might be very low, they represented the reproduction and inheritance of a clan. Any clan leader would want to fight to the death if they heard that their females and cubs had ended up in such a state. The most troublesome thing now is that even if the cubs and females are lucky enough to survive, they are still imprisoned in various clans. If we try to rescue them by force, I'm afraid we won't be able to save many of them. Of course, I'll still try my best to do this and see if there are other ways to rescue these cubs as much as possible. However, we have to consider the worst-case scenario. Therefore, I'll get someone to make a list for you. You have to give me a list of the priority to rescue those cubs." Lin Yuan sighed and said, "I know that making such a choice is actually a very cruel and painful thing for a clan leader, but there's no other way. Some things, sacrifice is also necessary." Yin Lei clenched his teeth, as if he was afraid that he would roar as soon as he opened his mouth. After a long while, Yin Lei finally calmed down. He turned his eyes and fixed his gaze on Lin Yuan's face. He made a deep sound from his throat and said with a voice that was almost squeezed out, "You promised me before that you would make these clans pay a painful price. Do you still keep your promise?" "Yes." Lin Yuan didn't hesitate and responded directly, because he knew that Yin Lei was going to be ruthless in the following period of time. Those abducted females and cubs were either dead or crippled. Even if they were lucky enough to be found, the Silver Moon clan, which had 4 desolate demon realm experts, would be reduced from a powerful clan in the Hengduan mountain range to a small clan that was not much better than the demon beasts in the demon beast forest. Many of their former enemies would even come forward to ruthlessly trample on them. If it's really impossible, then don't rescue them. The killing intent in Yin Lei's eyes was almost tangible. He said in a hoarse voice, "If it really comes to that, I'm willing to cooperate with all your actions. I only want a result. Those clans that participated in the plot against the Silver Moon clan will all be buried with my clan." "Okay." Lin Yuan still didn't hesitate. No matter how one looked at it, Lin Yuan hated traitors very much. Even if these clans didn't betray him, after the beast Master Kirin was seriously injured and unconscious, these clans did stand on the opposite side of the northern frontier. Although they didn't directly act against the northern frontier, in fact, what these clans did shook the northern frontier quite a bit. Whether it was to take revenge or to clean up the Hengduan mountain range and lay the foundation for controlling the Hengduan mountain range, Lin Yuan had to destroy these clans. After all, if they could betray the beast Master Kirin now, who knew if they would betray him in the future? Looking at Yin Lei in front of him, Lin Yuan suddenly felt a chill on his back. The wolf is a very cruel, cunning, and intelligent animal. No matter if they were wild beasts or demon beasts, wolves were always enough to make experienced hunters tremble in fear. Chapter 1074. Most of the wolves would gather in packs and attach great importance to cooperation. When a wolf pack hunts with perfect cooperation, no matter if it was a herbivore or a majestic carnivore, it would be difficult for them to escape in the end. Especially when the number of wolves reached a certain scale, it was simply a nightmarish existence. However, the most dangerous wolf would always be a lone wolf, not a pack of wolves. This was because a lone wolf would not be able to hunt those large prey. Hunting those large prey would definitely result in injuries. Even the slightest injury would be fatal to a lone wolf. Furthermore, small prey would not be able to fill their stomachs. Therefore, they could only follow behind their target from afar and use all means to weaken their target, waiting for their target to reveal a flaw. Therefore, a lone wolf would definitely have enough patience to stare at every prey that it had set its eyes on and wait for the prey to reveal a fatal weakness. And now, Lei was forced from a clan leader to a lone wolf by the various clans in the Hungduan mountain range. A lone wolf that wanted to drag those clans that had hurt him to the grave with him regardless of the cost. In a few days, I will send envoys into the Hungduan mountain range to communicate with the clan leaders. I will also make it clear that in this war against the Frost Mirror Grassland, which clan killed the most Xuanjin barbarian, I will support that person to become the new Beast King. Therefore, you can make some preparations in advance. I will also secretly send you some Xuanjin barbarian heads. In addition, those clan leaders think that they have grasped your weakness. Rather than continuing to argue endlessly, I think they will be more inclined to support you. After you become the new beast master of the Hungduan mountain range, I hope that you can be more stable. Don't think about revenge first. You have to try your best to get closer to the various clans and think of ways to provoke conflicts between them. When the time comes, I will enter the game again and ask for the cubs of your clan that they have imprisoned. They shouldn't have any more objections. After all the handover, it will be time for you and me to settle the score with them. Lin Yuan turned his head and looked in the direction of the Monster King court. He said in a deep voice, "This is the general plan. If there are any changes in the middle, I will think of a way to contact you. Is that okay?" "No problem. Then, I'll take my leave first." Lei nodded. After a few ups and downs, he hid in the bushes on the side and gradually disappeared. At this moment, the captain of the embroidered uniform guard urged his horse closer to Lin Yuan and stared in the direction that Lei had left in. He said in a low voice, "Sir Dragon King, this monster's emotions seem to be very unstable. Based on my personal advice, I feel that you shouldn't bet all your chips on it. The new beast master doesn't necessarily have to be supported." He paused and said in a low voice, "Supporting a member of one of the three Beast King factions, whether it's the Stoneclaw Forest under your command or the former Beast King Kieran's subordinate, I think it's a good choice." "Okay, got it," Lin Yuan replied casually. "Lord Dragon King, you..." The captain of the embroidered uniform guard took a deep breath and spoke again. However, Lin Yuan only glanced at him coldly and said in a deep voice, "I said I got it. Do you understand?" "Yes." The captain of the embroidered uniform guard was interrupted by Lin Yuan. He could only straighten his back on the horse and reply in a deep voice. On the Frost Mirror Grassland, the third prince looked in the direction of the Hungduan mountains with a gloomy face. It was as if water was about to drip out of his eyes. He gritted his teeth and said, "They're all a bunch of lunatics." When they heard the word plunder, it was like they were poisoned. They all rushed toward the northern frontier and couldn't be pulled back. Now that they've been stopped by the northern frontier outside the Great Wall, they're regretting it now. What were they doing earlier? The old Khan of the Shuliao tribe had countless women in his lifetime, so naturally, he had many children as well. However, only the 13th prince, who was known as a fierce tiger, and the third prince, who was often referred to as the sly fox. Of course, in the old Khan's eyes, even his 13th brother, who was considered by countless people to be the next Frost Mirror Kagan, was nothing more than a brute with brawn but no brains. His 13th brother was a typical Frost Mirror man. He was barbaric and fierce. When his temper flared, he would disregard everything and drive his horse to smash all obstacles in front of him. He liked to plunder, hunt, and fight. Through these actions, he proved his excellence and showed his glory. However, like most Frost Mirror men, his 13th brother could be said to be the embodiment of both the wolf and the dog. When the wind was favorable, he could be the champion of 3 armies. When the wind was against him, he was like a stray dog. He never knew what it meant to feign defeat and turn the tables. It was just like how no one knew that the plundering of the northern frontier had always been encouraged by his 13th brother's hanger-on. That was why he had led a group of Shiwaliao knights into the northern frontier before the main force had set out. It was just like how no one knew that the hanger-on who had encouraged the 13th prince to plunder the northern frontier in advance was a spy he had raised. Even if the 13th prince hadn't been stopped by the northern frontier, he would still have been killed by a cold knife behind his back. He was destined to never return to the grasslands. In the end, everything went smoother than he had expected. He had even thought about how to suppress the ambitious tribes through various means after he took over the throne, how to use other activities to suppress the Xuanzhan dynasty's plundering of the borders every year, and how to start a good relationship with the other dynasties. In the end, he was just thinking about it. His father, who had lost the vision he had when he was young, still thought that he was a famous general who could dominate the world. Every day, he would go through a cycle of recalling the glory of the past. Again and again, he was more and more certain that the Yin Xingqi was in his hands back then. He had suffered a setback instead of being stabbed in the back by Lei Qiuxing. Therefore, his father still made that stupid decision. Attack the northern frontier? What would they use to attack the northern frontier? Ever since the northern frontier had reclaimed the north, they had always been fighting with the Sky Demon. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the northern frontier had always regarded the Xuanzhan dynasty as a strong enemy. Even the Wei River defense line that faced the Sky Demon was not as expensive as the Great Wall of the northern frontier. It could even be said that from the day the Great Wall of the northern frontier was successfully built, the northern frontier had been waiting for the day the Frost Mirror cavalry would be beaten to a pulp by the Great Wall. He had thought that he wouldn't live to see that day in his lifetime. However, he hadn't expected that his father, the Sky Khan of the Grasslands, would really plunder the northern frontier again in order to confirm the 13th prince's life and death. Chapter 1075. Now retribution had come. No matter what the northern frontier did next, the Frost Mirror Plains were destined to be unstable. This was especially true for the Bloodspan tribe. After making 2 decisions that had caused the other tribes of the plains to suffer heavy losses, they would soon be surrounded and attacked by all the other tribes, let alone continue to control the other tribes. The 3rd prince turned his head and looked at the Blood Liao tribe in the distance, where smoke was rising in spirals. He sighed in his heart. Only then did he say to the group of knights who had set out with him and were carrying bags of various sizes, "Brothers, last night the wolf god entered my dream and warned me that a great disaster was about to befall the Frost Mirror Plains. We must leave the Frost Mirror Plains in order to survive. Today, we only have 28 riders, but in the future, when we return to the plains, we will still be able to move unhindered. At that time, all of you will become khans of your respective tribes. Let's go. Hurrah!" The Bloodspan knights behind the 3rd prince all raised their scimitars and roared. These Bloodspan knights were not veterans who had served for many years. Those veterans had all set out with the old khans, but many of the reserves had remained in the Bloodspan tribe. The 3rd prince had basically picked out the most outstanding of them, intending to use them as his subordinates when he went to other regions. Although these young Bloodspan knights did not know what had happened in the outside world, their talent was there, so none of them were fools. Thus, they all tacitly agreed not to ask the 3rd prince why he had only brought them away and not the entire Bloodspan tribe, since he had already foreseen the disaster of the plains. From the moment they stepped out of the Bloodspan tribe, The people behind them had been abandoned. In the following operations, they would only be the scapegoats and protectors of this small group. The third prince sat on his tall warhorse, his eyes shining as he stared into the distance. He sternly said, "We'll go against the flow and go to the border of the Azure River Empire first. I'll have people set up all sorts of supplies there. Once we get there, we'll trim our hair and change our clothes. We'll disguise ourselves as a caravan and enter the Azure River Empire. We'll slowly accumulate strength and wait for an opportunity." A caravan? A Blood Liao knight was startled for a moment before whispering, "Third prince, can we disguise ourselves as something else? Besides you, everyone else in this group is a murderous martial artist. The soldiers at the checkpoint have sharp eyes and will be able to tell at a glance that we aren't ordinary. Isn't this plan a little too risky?" Due to the recent actions of the northern frontier, the Azure River Empire could be said to be in a state of panic. They constantly set up a large number of defensive fortifications near the Hengduan mountain range. Even the Wei River had to patrol several times a day to ensure that no one had infiltrated the Azure River Empire before they were willing to stop. Other than the leader who looked a little weak, the rest of the team was filled with killing intent. It was impossible to fool the eyes of the sentinels. Guards? Have you ever seen a caravan that dares to hire guards like this? A gentlemanly young man was walking with the group while the rest of them were filled with murderous intent. If this was a normal caravan, they would rather spend more resources and hire more guards. After all, anything could happen on the trade route. Not to mention that guards would join hands with bandits to rob caravans. Even guards would change their identities and return to do the same job. It was not uncommon in the commercial district of the various empires. "It's fine." The third prince narrowed his eyes slightly and said, "I've already prepared your identities. When the time comes, don't speak. As long as you don't expose our Frost Mirror tribe's accent, I guarantee that you can enter the Azure River Empire's territory. Moreover, we're only going to cross their border. We don't really plan to become merchants. At most, we'll just give them some benefits." The Blood Liao knight who raised the question finally shut up and retreated, not daring to speak again. After all, the third prince's title of Sly Fox was not fake. Since he had already prepared in advance, he would naturally be fully prepared. He was only worried that the third prince had not thought of this, so he stood out to remind him. As for why they chose the Azure River Empire, it was because the Azure River Empire's geographical conditions were superior. It had a much larger area and production than the Cloud Empire. Even after the demon Venerable took over the southern wilderness, the Azure River Empire's territory was much larger than the Cloud Empire's. In addition, the Azure River Empire's army's combat ability on land was indeed inferior. Not to mention these carefully selected Blood Liao knights. Even the regular army of the other empires would be able to beat the Azure River Empire on land. The 28 of them could be called the best horse bandits on the other side. "Let's go." The third prince nodded slightly. His legs clamped tightly on the horse's belly, and he fiercely whipped the warhorse under him. Actually, he had a secret that even his biological father did not know. And that was he was very strong. The third prince had never seriously fought with anyone because he was used to using his brain to solve problems. Over time, most of the Frost Mirror people believed that the third prince was a sickly invalid who couldn't even ride a horse. But in truth, this was only because of his special constitution. He had secretly tested himself, and no one at the same cultivation level could take 3 of his moves. He had done quite a few tests before, and finally came up with a more pertinent data. When he circulated his stellar energy, he was 9 to 15 times more efficient than other cultivators of the same cultivation level. However, his meridians were no different from those of ordinary people, so every time he attacked, he had to endure the pain of his meridians being torn apart. Without harming his body, he could only attack 3 times a day at most. No one knew that if his valiant 13th brother was within 7 steps of him, he could kill him with a single palm. Meanwhile, at the northern frontier, in the Bureau of Military Intelligence, Zhang Xiuzhu looked away from the war sandbox and turned to the embroidered uniform guard who had just entered. He questioned, The 13th prince of your Bloodspan tribe has just left the Frost Mirror grassland with 27 Bloodspan cavalry reserves. They're heading south along the Wei River. It seems that they intend to cross the river and enter the Azure River Empire. Is this news true? The embroidered uniform guard nodded slightly and said, Lord Zhang, Lord Yu beside you is also a member of the embroidered uniform guard, so you should know how we do things. We either keep our mouths shut, but once we speak, we never lie. Good. Zhang Xiuzhu clapped his hands and called over an officer. He said in a low voice, You will temporarily take over my position and order the troops in the Hengduan mountain range to retreat in an orderly manner. I have to go out for a trip. When I come back, I will give you a reward. Chapter 1076. The same news was quickly sent to Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. He clearly hadn't expected the third prince to be so decisive, directly abandoning his tribe and leaving quietly with only a few elites. He planned to settle down in another dynasty and rebuild his power. If you don't remove the roots when you cut the grass, it will grow again when the spring breeze blows. Lin Yuan turned to the embroidered uniform guard captain who had come to inform him as soon as he received the news and said, Immediately send a message to Shunning City and release the third prince, who is anxious to return home. He hasn't seen his family for so long. He must be itching to reunite with his brothers, right? That's right. It's it and not him. The 13th prince of the Xuanjin dynasty had truly died in the first clash between the Blood Liao Knights and the Blackwater Army. However, due to some special reasons, the 13th prince had become one of the 6 paths of reincarnation, the Hungry Ghost Path. He had been kept in captivity by the Ministry of Works for research and had been trained to be as docile as a puppy. Lin Yuan was very curious as to why the 13th prince, who was extraordinarily brave, had become one of the Hungry Ghost Path and not the Azura Path after his death. However, this was also one of the reasons why he firmly believed that the 6 paths of reincarnation would appear. Especially after seeing the Wine Sword mystery, the 6 paths in Lin Yuan's eyes were no longer complete. Release it? The embroidered uniform guard captain swallowed dryly. His expression was somewhat ugly as he said in a low voice, Lord Dragon King, the Ministry of Works hasn't reported this, so you may not know some things. This existence that you call Hungry Ghost has brought us a lot of trouble. Although it's not the autumn harvest season now, the rice fields are beginning to mature. If we release it, who knows how much we'll have to pay to get it to where we need it. Lin Yuan was speechless. After a moment of silence, Lin Yuan said somewhat speechlessly, Did I tell you to release it directly in Shunning City? Doesn't the Ministry of Works have a special cage? Stuff this guy in the cage and release it when we arrive at the destination. Is this so hard to understand? But the captain of the embroidered uniform guard looked like he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. He said in a low voice, Our spies only know that the third prince took a group of elites and left the Bloodridge tribe, but he wasn't one of the chosen ones. That's why we only know that the third prince left, as well as the general direction he took when he left. There are too many routes to choose from. So how would we know which one is the only way? From the Frost Mirror grassland to the Wei River ferry, there was no path that one had to take, because there were too many routes to choose from. Even if the Sky Demon was causing trouble in the Central Plains, there were still no less than 10 routes to choose from. Forget it. If you can't find them, just follow Zhang Xiuzhu. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. Didn't the people we captured say that the 13th prince entered the northern frontier at the instigation of the third prince's spies? Even if he didn't encounter the Blackwater army, the 13th prince would have died to his own people. That's why that guy planned to make the northern frontier take the blame from the start. Since that's the case, why shouldn't I give him a gift in return? Yes, sir. The captain of the embroidered uniform guard cupped his fists in acknowledgement. In the entire northern region, there was almost no one who hated the Frost Mirror barbarians more than Zhang Xiuzhu. Therefore, when the same news reached Zhang Xiuzhu's ears, even if the Central Plains and the South were at peace, as long as the third prince didn't go along the coastline, he would definitely use his connections to block him. not to mention that there were no less than 10 routes he could take. On the other side, under the Great Wall of the northern frontier, Xiao En, whose black armor was almost dyed a dark brown by blood, touched the blood that splashed onto his faceplate. He reached out and hacked down a Xuanjian barbarian who was about to climb up the city gate tower. With a sunken voice, he said, "Lu Zongwu, are you done yet?" In the distance, the bald man's voice slowly sounded. "I'm still checking if there are any malfunctions. There's still about an hour left. I'll have to trouble everyone to hold on for a bit longer." "All right." Xiaowen's words were concise and comprehensive, but the impatience in his eyes couldn't be faked in the slightest. After all, the two sides had already begun the official battle. This battle was no longer restricted by victory or defeat. This was a battle of face after the northern frontier's dragon riders provoked the Frost Mirror Barbarian. Once it began, one side had to be beaten until they couldn't raise their heads anymore. However, even if the northern frontier's dragon riders were well equipped, they still couldn't endure such a terrifying battle of attrition. Of course, the northern frontier dragon riders who were wearing heavy armor and continuously bursting with power were clearly more numerous than the northern frontier dragon riders who were killed by the enemy. If the troops under Lu Zongwu's command were included, then the casualty ratio in this battle of the mountain pass was almost 1:15. To be honest, this kind of casualty ratio wasn't bad, but it definitely wasn't normal either. After all, relying on the fortifications, even a pig could kill several Frost Mirror Barbarian who were trying to climb up the city walls. These fellows seemed to have gone crazy. Xiaoen once again hacked down a Frost Mirror Barbarian as he muttered with a cold expression. He didn't even know what kind of heaven-defying thing he had done. These Frost Mirror Barbarian cavalry even gave up on their warhorses and crossbows and directly charged at the mountain pass city walls. They didn't have any siege weapons, so they just chopped down trees and started building. They really couldn't keep up with the pace. There were even some Xuanjian barbarian who began to climb the city walls with their bare hands. This scene was simply too savage and terrifying. "It's done. Prepare to retreat." In the distance, Lu Zongwu's voice rang out once again. "Everyone, bring 3 days' worth of rations and water and retreat 50 kilometers. Hearing Lu Zongwu's voice, Xiaoen suddenly raised his head and gave the first order to his subordinates ever since the tempo of the battle changed to one of offense and defense. The northern frontier dragon riders and the soldiers guarding the mountain pass who were still fighting on the front lines used all of their strength. In a short period of time, they actually cleared out all of the enemy troops who had climbed up or were about to climb up the mountain pass. Then, they didn't even bother with the next wave of enemies and all ran down the city walls. Riding on the war horses and demonic beasts that had been prepared long ago, these northern frontier soldiers didn't even communicate with each other. Moreover, their faces were filled with exhaustion. There were even some who were so tired that they directly tied themselves to the backs of their mounts and fell asleep. Very quickly, almost all of the northern frontier soldiers retreated from this mountain pass. The Frost Mirror Barbarian cavalry, who climbed up the mountain afterwards, were all dumbfounded. They had spent so much effort to fight their way up, but in the end, this place had become an empty city. Originally, they were unafraid of death when they charged at the city walls, and were rejoicing that they weren't attacked when they climbed up the city walls. But at this moment, all of that vanished into thin air. The enemy had wanted to run from the very beginning, but they had been desperately cheering themselves on from behind. Just what were they trying to achieve? Chapter 1077. The news of the mountain pass falling into enemy hands was immediately reported to the command system set up in the northern frontier. However, it did not attract the attention of many people, including Lin Yuan. The entire command level of the northern frontier only indifferently brushed this matter aside. After all, although this matter was not part of the initial plan, if it could be carried out smoothly, it would definitely be a heavy blow to the Xuanjian dynasty. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, Xiaoen pulled on the reins, controlling the demonic beast under him to head towards the mountain pass. He turned his head to look at Lu Zongwu beside him, his eyes filled with a bit of coldness. He said in a deep voice, Are you sure that everything has been arranged properly and that there will not be any mistakes?" Lu Zhongwu did not say anything. He only estimated the time in his heart and slowly raised his hand to cover his ears. Boom! A shocking sound reverberated. Even after running at full speed for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, they could still see the outline of the mountain pass. After the loud sound, it suddenly turned into dust and scattered stone fragments that filled the sky. Even though they were so far away, Xiaoyin and Lu Zhongwu could still feel a terrifying wave of qi pushing them backwards. "This is the gunpowder that Lord Dragon King developed." A light flashed past Lu Zhongwu's eyes, and he had a thoughtful expression. Although the Tianwu world emphasized on cultivation, the technology in various aspects was not considered backward. Although the various facilities seemed strange to Lin Yuan, their practicality did not lose to the various technological products that he had seen in his previous life. However, the biggest difference between the two was that in a world where cultivation existed, even if the development of technology was not weak, it was still a side branch of cultivation. For example, those so-called city defense cannons and floating vehicles could not be separated from the energy supply of cultivators. It could be said that any technological products could only be used in the hands of cultivators, and it was absolutely impossible for mortals to use them. Even if this world also had the existence of items like spirit stones, it was obviously not as convenient as the novel where spirit stones were placed and activated by a small formation to turn the spirit stones into various technological products. However, Lin Yuan's creativity was clearly different from the scientists of the Tianwu world. He combined what he had seen and heard in his previous life, as well as the various skills he had learned later on, to continuously provide the Ministry of Works with ideas. Then, he relied on the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce to provide the Ministry of Works with a large amount of research funds, allowing them to experiment and make mistakes. Only then did they come up with quite a lot of advanced technology. For example, the cement used to build the Northern Frontier's Great Wall was a magically modified version of the one used in the Tianwu world. The price of the raw materials was enough to make any cement merchant in his previous world leave while cursing. However, for the entire Northern Frontier, this was just a small amount of money. After the cement was put into use, many construction projects had saved a lot of time and materials. Overall, it was still a profit. More importantly, cement didn't require energy to operate. Even if an ordinary person mastered this technology, they could quickly build an incomparably magnificent building. As for the gunpowder, it was also an idea proposed by Lin Yuan. The Northern Frontier's Ministry of Works had magically modified it. The raw materials had undergone a huge change, and it could be said to be extremely expensive. However, it was worth mentioning that the might of the magically modified gunpowder was incomparably terrifying. After 50 kilograms of gunpowder was detonated, the power was even comparable to the full strength attack of a level 3 Void Realm cultivator. If one directly carried a ton of gunpowder and detonated it together, it might even be comparable to the full strength attack of a false god expert. Although the gunpowder that Xiaoyin and Lu Zhongwu had buried under the mountain pass didn't stop, it was estimated to be around 300 kilograms. The terrifying power of the explosion instantly shattered the incomparably majestic mountain pass. As for those Northern Frontier barbarians, before the gunpowder was detonated, they were probably still counting the various resources that they had deliberately left in the mountain pass to buy time. Therefore, if there were no accidents, those Frost Mirror barbarian who had entered the mountain pass or were near the mountain pass at that time would probably have their corpses vaporized in the explosion. The most terrifying thing was that this black technology created by Lin Yuan, although it required a series of auxiliary equipment to ensure the safety of the operator to explode with terrifying destructive power, it still didn't have any requirements on whether the operator was a cultivator or not. Even if the one who detonated the gunpowder was an ordinary person, the power of the explosion wouldn't be weakened in the slightest. Xiaoyin cast a sidelong glance at Lu Zhongwu, who seemed to be deep in thought, and said expressionlessly, "It seems that the gunpowder shipped by the Ministry of Works is much more terrifying than we previously imagined. No wonder when I suggested it. Lord Dragon King didn't even have any intention of objecting and directly agreed. It seems that he already knew the terrifying power of this gunpowder. However, if you have any other ideas, I advise you to put them away as soon as possible. You should know that the output of the Ministry of Works is shockingly low. If there really is something good, let alone you, even Li Zhongxing might not be able to get it. Speaking up to here, he smiled and raised the thick-backed machete in his hand in the direction of the mountain pass ruins. He roared, "Now, it's time for us to attack." The time it took for a stick of incense to burn wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. By the time Xiao Wen's group returned to the mountain pass that had already turned into ruins, their footsteps had already begun to slow down. This was because there were all kinds of ruins, broken limbs, and minced meat all around them. There were even some places where no one could be seen, but there were large patches of blood. Of course, the toughness of cultivators' lives was also something that everyone knew. Even though the incident had happened suddenly, there were still quite a few vigilant Frost Mirror Barbarian who had promptly mobilized their vital energy and aura energy to protect themselves. Although most of them still couldn't escape this calamity, there was still a considerable portion of Frost Mirror Barbarian who had survived. Right now, under the command of some tribal leaders, they were cleaning up the rubble that had scattered in all directions due to the explosion. At the same time, they were also continuously searching for the Frost Mirror Barbarian who had been crushed under the rubble but was still alive. Suddenly, they saw the northern frontier soldiers who had previously abandoned the mountain pass and gave them a huge surprise turn back once more. The hearts of some tribal leaders immediately sank with a thump sound. They gloomily looked at the northern frontier soldiers, quietly clenching the machetes in their hands. Xiao calmly looked at the increasing number of Frost Mirror Barbarian soldiers. Suddenly, he grinned, stretched out his hand, and pulled out the divine crossbow from behind him, aiming it at the Frost Mirror Barbarian in front of him. Whether it was light cavalry or heavy cavalry, mobility was the most important thing. Even heavy cavalry had to maintain a certain speed to be able to cause damage to the enemy. However, the environment of the ruins was indeed not suitable for cavalry to charge. Therefore, even though there were still many Frost Mirror Barbarian soldiers who had been severely injured in Xiao Wen's eyes, they were still lambs waiting to be slaughtered. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.